Chapter 29:35 The dissolution of their discipleship. 3 All of a sudden, her craving for wine kicked in again. There was a sense of tastelessness in her mouth, and she could not think of anything better than filling that emptiness with fine wine. Indeed, she was reminded of the wine from Difui, especially during one of those days when they were together in the Devil Kingdom, and still acting like a couple. At the time, Difui would always be present around her and bring her for good food, and even some shopping. Those were the days when things were simpler. In fact, it was probably one of her fondest memories. In anticipation and fear, the day had finally come. Gu Shijio agreed to meet with Difui in a vast solitary desert in the Celestial Kingdom. The deserted barren territory was only filled with sand. There was not even a tree in sight. When Difui arrived, he caught her sitting on the sandy hill, staring at the scorching sun. She did not seem to care about the harm that the sun would do to her eyes. Also, she seemed a little lonely. His heart ached for her, but he was also relieved that she showed up as promised. "Divine Lord," he called out as he approached her from the front. She stood up and rubbed her eyes to look at him. Her black watery eyes glistened under the sun. Uncomfortably, she rubbed her eyes again before asking, "Do you have any wine? I think we should drink to mark the farewell." Difui remained quiet. Was she trying to play any tricks again? No. Difui firmly denied. Gu Shijio seemed a little disappointed, but the smile on her face remained. She then offered him some wine from a bottle. "I do. Shall we?" Subconsciously, she wanted to have another round of drinks with him. Perhaps, one with more fun and less judgment. There would not be another opportunity for her. Read latest chapters at Lis novel. Difui honestly thought that she was playing tricks with him again. After all, her drunken behavior was somewhat problematic. He did not want to have to postpone this matter to another day. He gave her a firm look in the eye and calmly said, "Divine Lord, the dissolution must be enforced, whether you like it or not. If you really want to drink, I will drink as many rounds as you want, but only once we have both fully recovered from the catastrophe. But for now, I will have to decline. What if I died from the lightning strikes? I will never get another chance to drink again." Gu Shijio replied ambiguously. Difui took a moment to study her complexion and noticed that her cheeks were pinkish. She looked healthy on the surface. Her strength was perhaps even better than his, as far as he could observe. Would the thunderbolt really kill her? If she were to die, then Difui would be gone before her. Difui found her behavior to be just like a dishonest child who kept coming up with all kinds of excuses to delay doing something. "Don't worry. I will make sure that you survive the catastrophe. Nothing will happen to you or me." He had spent a significant amount of time to prepare for this day. He would not let anything get in his way. Gu Shijio saw the impatient look in his eyes and finally came to terms that she would not have another chance to drink with him again. There was no point in forcing him anyway. Perhaps it had all come to an end for both of them. Difui looked at the sky and noticed that time was running out. It was best to get on with matters right away. He then urged, "Divine Lord, shall we begin? I have many things to attend to after this is done. We should not delay too much." "Fine," Gu Shijio replied after taking a deep breath. She finally agreed to him. He was relieved and said, "I need a little time to set up." Swiftly, he took out a few magical items to set up a wizardry barrier around them. Many golden needles were placed at the edge of the barrier. Gu Shijio sat on a dune and watched as he made the preparation. Chapter 29:36 The dissolution of their discipleship. 4 After a brief wait, Difui was finally done with the setup. He turned around and saw Gu Shijio sitting with her arms wrapped around her knees. Fixedly, she looked at him with a lack of engagement in her eyes. She seemed a little lost, like a child who was about to be abandoned. His heart ached for her again for a moment. But later, he laughed at the absurdity. She was the most superior being that had ever existed. Why would he even think of her as a child? As usual, he tended to overthink the situation whenever she was involved. He shook his head abruptly to dismiss the unwanted thoughts quickly and put his emotions aside. "Let's begin." He raised his hands and posed in a manner that suggested that he was ready to resist any of the impending thunderbolts. "All right," she agreed as she closed her eyes. Steadily, She sank her feet into the sand and took the chance to catch a quick breath. Then she started to dissolve the discipleship. From this moment on, I, Gu Shizhou, as the creator of the universe, will no longer be a master to Difui. Regardless of what happens, we shall embark on different paths from today onwards. Our lives will not cross paths from this moment on, and we will have nothing to do with each other anymore. Nothing to do with each other anymore? Difui's heart sank upon hearing her words. Once Gu Shizhou was done, purple clouds started to surround them in the sky above, rolls upon rolls. Under the dark sky, her robes fluttered fiercely in the violent gusts of wind. Fui, your turn now. He was overwhelmed by a sudden sense of anxiety, but it was too late for him to turn back. With a deep breath he followed. From now on, I, Difui, will no longer be a disciple to Gu Shizhou, the Divine Lord. He did not say anything more, for he never intended to stay out of her life for good. 10 years was all he needed. After a decade, he would become a more capable man. When the time came, he would pursue her again and not give her the chance to escape. As soon as he finished speaking, the utterly stubborn love bracelet on their wrists shattered abruptly. The pieces then disappeared entirely. Something did not seem right. All he wanted to achieve was the dissolution of their discipleship. Nothing more. He stood right up and uttered, "This?" Before he could say anything more, the first streak of lightning struck like the deadly blade of a grim reaper. As soon as the violence erupted, it felt like doomsday was upon them. He had never seen or expected such a horrifying sight. Difui subconsciously evaded the streaks of lightning. Meanwhile, Gu Shizhou cast a streak of 7 colored rays to encapsulate him in a protective barrier. Just then, a streak of lightning hit the 7-colored layer of protection and immediately shattered it into pieces. The flash of white light actually penetrated the barrier and struck him. He could feel his veins boiling and aching in unspeakable pain. Even the colors started to fade from his cheeks. The next streak of lightning was aimed at Gu Shizhou. She made a turn to cover herself in a 7-colored barrier of protection. However, no amount of protection was enough. The lightning dispersed the protective layer and struck her hard from above. Her face immediately went pale after just one strike. The streaks of catastrophic lightning continued to rain down upon them, one at a time, leaving them no room to catch their breaths. Every time the lightning struck, she would always protect him by casting a barrier around him using her own spiritual power. Although it was not enough to stop the flash of electricity, at least she could help to absorb some of the force from hitting him head-on. After a while, the clouds finally went away, revealing the scorching sun from behind them. During the catastrophe, every part of Difui's body was in pain to the point where he would rather just die. But oddly enough, the pain disappeared along with the ominous purple clouds. The only thing he felt now was exhaustion. The man was so tired that he wanted to take a restful nap right away. However, he tried to stay awake and quickly checked on Gu Shizhou. Chapter 2937 The Dissolution of Their Discipleship 5. Gu Shizhou stood firm and steady. Her clothes looked as neat and tidy as always. Not a strain of her hair was misplaced. In stark contrast, Difui looked like a complete mess in ragged clothes after the catastrophe. "Are you doing all right?" Difui took a step towards her and asked. Gu Shizhou gently shook her head while dismissing his question with a wave. "I am fine. Now go." Her voice sounded a little hoarse but was still clear. From the sound of her voice, it seemed that she was in a better condition than him. In fact, the only thing he noticed was that her complexion was a little pale, but nothing physically alarming. Unimpressed, Difui pursed his lips into a thin line. With another bold step forward, he then grasped her by the wrist. "Let me examine your pulse." All of a sudden, he could feel his hand being flung away fiercely. Apparently, Gu Shizhou did not control her strength as she wanted to push his hand away. She ended up tossing the man about 30 feet away. Luckily, Difui had not entirely lost his defensive instincts. With a swift turn in the air, he managed to channel the force away and made a perfect landing. He looked back at her, only to catch an icy look in her eyes. There was an immense sense of authority as she looked down at him, immediately setting a distance between them. To add to Difui's disappointment, she spoke coldly. "You and I have nothing to do with one another now. You don't have to see me anymore." Immediately after speaking, she disappeared into thin air. Obviously, she had teleported away. Di Fui stood frozen for a moment. He closed his eyes and ignored the fear in his mind as he tried to make sense of the situation. His analysis told him that her strength should be around level 2 of a great deity. Her complexion was not so bad either. At least she could still perform teleportation. Her condition was much better than the last time he saw her in the glacier. From these observations, it was safe to assume that she was doing just fine, though her spiritual power might have been affected to a certain degree. She should be able to recover her strength after a few days in the glacier. He knew it was his fault for pushing her boundaries to the extreme, but he was really reluctant to continue being her disciple. He certainly did not want to walk in Fan Qianxi's footsteps. Then his eyes caught hold of his bare wrist. Di Fui's only intention was to stop being her disciple, so he did not fully understand why the love bracelet would break apart as it did. However, he did not believe that a pair of bracelets could predetermine their fate. Besides, he already had a plan. In a few days, he would pay her a visit to her and bring her some wine. He knew how much she liked the sour plum wine, so he personally made a few gallons of it. He was certain that the taste was guaranteed to be the finest. She would definitely like it. By offering Gu Shijiu her favorite food and wine, he believed that the compensation would be enough for him to ask for her forgiveness. Even if she refused to forgive him at first, the two of them were immortals, so he still had a long time to deal with the problem. If she liked to eat, he would bring her to all 6 worlds in search of the finest food. He knew that there were some restaurants with excellent delicacies that she had yet to try. The scorching sun continued to burn in the desert, so it did not take long for Di Fui to work up a sweat. He made a thorough examination of his body and found out that his blood circulation was generally fine without the slightest obstruction. The only noteworthy change was a decrease in his spiritual power, but it was only mildly affected, almost negligible. He heaved a sigh as he was relieved that the catastrophic lightning did not pose any real harm to its victims. After all, the pain was actually tolerable. Furthermore, his spiritual power was lower than hers, so if he could handle the aftermath with ease, so could she. Di Fui's analytical skill was never wrong, but no amount of evidence could calm his raging and restless heart. It was like an important part of his life was about to come to an end. There were urgent matters that he should attend to, but he could no longer concentrate. He needed to see her. He wanted to see her, even if only from afar. He needed to be sure that she was fine. However, her teleportation skill left no traces of where she went. There was no way he could simply follow her footprints to find her. After a brief pause, he decided to ride on a cloud and search the area within a 100-mile radius. He had to stay focused and look for her, even though he was thoroughly exhausted. Chapter 29:38 The dissolution of their discipleship. 6 The deserted territory remained untraversed, and the silent hills remained static. There was no sign of Gu Shijiu within 100 miles of the place they had met earlier. Obviously, she was no longer in the area. Where would she go? Once again, Di Fui stepped foot into the Tianin Valley, a place where he had avoided for more than 2 years. The servants in the Tianin Valley carried out their respective chores as usual. All of them were kept occupied. National Master, what brings you here? A servant was surprised to find him in the valley. Di Fui went straight to the point and asked, "Has the Divine Lord returned?" The servant answered with a shake of his head. "No, she has been out for more than 20 days now and has yet to return to her residence." Apparently, she had not returned. Somehow, Di Fui seemed relieved. "When the Divine Lord comes back from her travels, please notify me at once. I have something of grave importance to discuss with her. Not a moment of delay is allowed." He then handed over a directed audio amulet to the servant. The servant was unsure of the reason behind the National Master's urgency, but he knew how much the Divine Lord cared for the man. No one was allowed to say anything disrespectful against the National Master, so he knew he had to reflect the same amount of respect that the Divine Lord had for him. Once the servant accepted the device, Di Fui turned and left. He wanted to go to the glacier first, but the thought of his abandoned residence reminded him of his priorities. Swiftly, he made a quick turn and headed in a different direction. The gallons of fine wine that he intended to give to Gu Shijiu were all stored in the abandoned residence. He had to dig into the ground to uncover the big jars of wine that were left underground for fermentation. The tantalizing fragrance of the wine had filled the air. It seemed that the underground fermentation had certainly worked some magic in the wine. Difui knew that there was no way she could resist the temptation of such finely made wine. Also, he guessed that if she had not returned to the Tianyin Valley, she must have visited the glacier to restore her spiritual power. Knowing her, these were the only two places that she would go to if she needed to recover. He would surely find her in either place. Back at the glacier, the whole place was buried in a layer of thick, white snow. Difui went straight to the ice cabin to look for Gu Shijio. The igloo still stood in solidarity against the vast white snow in the vicinity. None of the furniture in the cabin had changed or been moved, and Gu Shijio was nowhere to be seen. Disappointed, he took a look around the cabin to check if there were any traces of her left behind. From what he discovered, she must have visited the place at least 3 times in the past 2 years. Each visit would have been for about 2 weeks. To his surprise, she did not make her way here this time. Was she still on her way? Or did she need to recover elsewhere because of the nature of the injury? He found 2 scrunched balls of paper in one of the corners of the cabin and opened them. Although it was messy, he could tell at once that it was Gu Zijia's handwriting. It looked like she wrote the words out of boredom, as some of the content did not make much sense. If only he waited for an hour more, things would be fine. Maybe we were never meant to be. I am not feeling well. My heart aches a little. He has not been here for 2 months now, not even once. Perhaps he will never come. Although his culinary skills are far from impressive, his ability to make wine was undoubtedly amazing. I wonder if we'll have another drink together. Difui could feel his fingers going numb, and noticed that his fingertips had turned whitish. Although there were no names mentioned, he knew very well that he was the one she was writing about. Apparently, she was not completely emotionless after all. Perhaps she had visited the glacier so frequently over the past 2 years just to see him. Nevertheless, he did not quite understand what she meant by if he only waited for an hour more. He straightened up the other piece of paper and started reading its contents too. His face went pale almost instantaneously. He was so shocked that he could not even stand up straight. He read the scribbles that were on the second piece of paper, and almost sank to the ground. I do not have much time. There is only half a month left. I want to live my life in my last days. I will not keep worrying about Fan Qianshi anymore. I want to taste all the good food in the world and have no regrets. I am still craving for the wine that he made. Actually, I am a little scared. Difui's hands started trembling uncontrollably. From the traces of the ink he could tell that the message was written about half a month ago. Chapter 2939 The Fall of a Deity in His Chaotic Mind. Flashes of memory started to play and rewind. Why should we end it? I promise that I will never tell anyone or control you in any way. If we insist on carrying out the dissolution, both of us would be punished by the catastrophic thunderbolts. What if I don't make it? Difui, what a coincidence. We meet again. Shall we have a drink? Let's have a drink. Do you have any wine? I think we should have a drink to mark the farewell. What if I died from the catastrophic lightning? I will never be able to drink again. Her words continued to echo in his head. In an instant, his mind was overwhelmed by all of the memories of her. He had not forgotten anything that she said. And now everything finally made sense. All of a sudden, he was reminded about the recent reports he received regarding her whereabouts. Master, the Divine Lord has been spending her time traveling the world, mostly in restaurants and bars. She will always order all of the signature dishes but only to take a few bites. In a rush to find her, Difui tripped over a stone and almost found himself tumbling into the snow. He staggered a little before ultimately finding his balance again. Fear and anxiety had completely taken over his state of mind, but he had to find her. Ajio, you have to wait for me. You are not allowed to leave. Oh God, why are these flowers withering? What is happening? It is only June, and yet the leaves are already turning brown. Hey guys, have a look at the lake. It is drying up. Where did the water go? The lake has never dried up before. Such strong winds. Run, run. My goodness. Has God been infuriated? It is raining. Raining. Oh God, why is it raining blood? The world had turned into a state of complete chaos. Visit website Our List novel. Calm strong winds continued to ravage the surface, howling eerily like cries of grudging spirits. All of the streams dried out to the point where even the bottom of the dried lake started to crack. Clouds filled the sky, obscuring the sun from reaching the surface. In the stinging rain, streams of red water came down in a splash. It was as if the sky was crying tears of blood. As soon as Di Fui emerged from the glacier, he noticed these unusual happenings that immediately puzzled him. People were running for their life. Some were crying for help. Others were hiding in vaults. Basically, all of them were equally disturbed and puzzled, not sure of what was actually happening. Apart from their bafflement, they were also moved by a sudden urge to cry, like an uncontrollable expression of grief that was driving them to tears. Master, it is looking bad. The Atlas Mountains of the Celestial Kingdom is falling apart. Master, I am unsure why the Devil Kingdom is now raining meteorites. Many lives are at stake. Master, it does not look good. A massive earthquake struck the Monster Kingdom, tearing the rivers apart. Even the ground is falling apart, too. Master, the beasts of the Animal Kingdom are all howling in unison. Master, the human world. Many reports came in simultaneously from all over the place. Strange happenings had taken over the 6 worlds at the same time. His men were trained to be calm, but for the first time, their voices were clearly trembling, and it sounded like they were already in tears. A wave of great sorrow had taken over every living soul's heart. It felt like the end of the world. Di Fui could no longer keep a clear mind, and his legs went weak like jellies. Due to the stinging rain, no one was out in the streets. Everyone was taking shelter in their homes. Therefore, Di Fui was the only one running around in a frenzy under the rain, looking like an idiot. Unfortunately, no one knew where the location of the god of creation, so he did not know where he could find her. Chapter 2940 The Fall of a Deity. 2. The only means of communication that they shared was the directed audio amulet that he, unfortunately, destroyed with his own hands. Ajio, where are you? Where did you go? Suddenly, he was reminded of a place where he might be able to find her. Without wasting any time, he dashed off in that direction. Di Fui was headed to the forbidden land of God, which did not belong to any of the 6 worlds. The sky was now a dark tint of royal blue. Meanwhile, a grand hall of primitive simplicity was loosely hung in midair like magic. From the top of the hall, it felt so close to heaven that one could be drawn to reach for the stars above. Clouds lingered underneath Gu Zijia's feet in the Jade Hall. The entire place shone with vibrance and was absolutely scenic. Even Gu Shijio found the place to be magnificent. And it just so happens to be where she was born. It was also here that she awoke from her deep, long slumber. She remembered stepping out of the place right when she woke up. Although the place offered spectacular scenery, she was quite reluctant to come by. The place was dead silent, which was nothing like the lively world out there. There was no sound at all, not even the breeze. It was as if time stood still here. Yet, the ominous silence was depressing, as it made Gu Shijio feel like it was the end of the world. She liked to be in crowded places, and was always fond of the city noises, which was why she loathed the stillness of the place. If she had the choice, she would not choose to return to this place. However, there she was again, back to point zero, where everything started. She did not have much time to spare. She had to make it to the top of the hall before her immortalization. The array formation was already well set, so she could channel her final strength as a mighty god to support the foundation of all 6 worlds. The star formation was the key to everything. Therefore, hastily, she found her way to the edge of the formation, and sighed as she gazed upon the brightest star in the middle. The people of the 6 worlds often thought that she refused to be involved in the affairs of the world. They only saw her as a carefree woman traveling from one place to another. No one knew that she was actually the lifeblood of the 6 worlds. She was the reason that life existed in a flourishing and prosperous panorama. Once she was immortalized, the very foundation of the 6 worlds would certainly be greatly affected. Natural disasters were only the beginning, and things would get worse. The entire world might even collapse altogether. Therefore, she needed to enter the array formation before her immortalization struck. The formation would absorb her strength as a god and channel the power back to the 6 worlds to keep things stable. All the while, she was trying to buy some time until the next creator of the universe took over. Her soul as a god would eventually become the very essence that supported all the lives in the 6 worlds. So after her death, she would not be reincarnated ever again. The stars sparkled like diamonds as she walked barefooted to approach the top. There was a stinging pain in her every step with blood left behind on each star. Her footprint would instantly blossom into a blood-red lotus flower that would then wither away. From afar, the starry night sky seemed to be decorated with blood-red lotus flowers that looked beautiful yet were absolutely deadly. With the progress gained from every step, she finally made it to the center, where there was a lotus altar. Faintly, lights glowed from within the base as if gracing her presence. She slowly traced the altar with her eyes closed and heaved a sigh. Alas, everything must come to an end. The creator of the universe was always known to be strong and almighty. All beings highly appreciated her compassionate and loving character. However, they often forgot that deep down, she was actually just a girl too. She came into the world all alone, and now she had to leave alone too. She was actually scared. In fact, she wished that someone was here to walk her through the last moments of her life. However, she had no other choice but to lead a solitary life. She looked around while tracing her chapped lips and gazed out at the distant stars and noticed that the place was entirely devoid of wind. Although the surrounding temperature was nothing extreme, all she could feel was piercing cold. Even without any examination, she could tell that her bodily systems were slowly shutting down. As her strength slowly faded from her body, every inch of her veins slowly turned into ice. It was so cold. If only there were someone here to give her a warm hug, for the very last time. All of a sudden, she thought about the brief embrace that they shared in the glacier. It was a warm and solid hug. She could still remember the faint scent that immersed her nostrils. The way he smiled at her was full of tenderness and affection. Chapter 2941 The Fall of a Deity 3 Her heart ached at the thought of her fondest memory. Gently, a warm droplet of water dripped from her cheek onto the back of her hand. She stared at the droplet of water blankly, and was surprised that she was actually tearing up. Gu Zijia's sudden heartfelt emotion of pain and regret was nothing like what she had experienced before. It was as if a knife had been stabbed into her heart from before, but was being twisted around. She had never experienced it before in her life. The catastrophic thunderbolts from before had almost killed her. However, it seemed that her survival was, in turn, rewarded with the awakening of her emotions. Unfortunately, pain and torments were all that she could feel, and she became overwhelmed with great distress. Difui, you and I were never destined to be together after all. Gu Shijio closed her eyes to process her sorrow. Meanwhile, she started to experience frequent loss of consciousness, while her body slowly became frozen. She could no longer suppress the overflow of her power, and even some of her soul. Her eyelashes were already frozen into ice at this point, and so was her body. Slowly, she was losing all of her senses. Her circulation had completely shut down, while her power continued to drain from her body. Eventually, she would not be able to feel anything and fall into an eternity of darkness. It was finally time. She took her last breath and managed to make her way onto the altar. Her robe started to dance around as if pushed by an invisible force. With one last look, her eyes lingered on the 6 worlds for the very last time as she let out a bitter smile on her face. Gu Shijio certainly loved the world that she created, and now she was ready to die for it. With her eyes closed, the array formation became activated, and Gu Shijio found herself encapsulated in a streak of 7-colored ray. The 7-colored jade door was slightly ajar, and the strong currents of power from within the hall started to overflow, thus pushing anyone standing 100 meters from it. The crane boy who stayed to guard the place had to stay away by hiding behind a big rock. All of a sudden, Difui grasped him by his wings and demanded, "Is she in there?" The boy tried to maintain his composure, but his voice was obviously trembling. The Divine Lord. She was the one who opened the door and entered the place. Di Fui swiftly pushed the boy away and rushed towards the entrance, but the boy unfortunately hindered his attempt. National Master, only the Divine Lord is allowed to enter the place. No one else is permitted, or you will be turned into dust. Also, the door will only be open for half an hour each time. When time is up, the door will automatically be sealed, and can only be reopened a month later. The door has been left open for more than 3/4 of that time now. Soon it will be sealed, leaving you no way out. You cannot risk going in right now. Would I really turn into dust if I insisted on going in? Fan Qianshi went in there once, and look how good he is doing right now. The boy explained. Mr. Qianshi is no ordinary man. He is the disciple of the creator of the universe. The Divine Lord told me that as soon as Mr. Qianshi hatches the mystical candle dragon, he can come and go as he pleases, provided that his spiritual power is at level 8 of a great deity. By that time, I need not stop him from going into the Forbidden Land anymore. By the way, it was Mr. Qianshi who forcefully made his way into the place. He was lucky that the Divine Lord made her way here in time to take him out. Otherwise he would be long dead. You have no idea how dangerous it was for them. As soon as the Divine Lord sent him out, the door was immediately sealed. Her robes were almost stuck in the door. As a result, the Divine Lord was injured, and so was Mr. Qianshi. His skin was thoroughly burnt due to the exposure, and his wound was a rather eerie sight. Di Fui remained silent. The boy added, "The Divine Lord looked strange though. She was wearing a red bridal dress." Hastily, she came and left the place immediately after reprimanding Mr. Qianshi for his recklessness. She teleported right away like she was trying to make it back to her wedding. In fact, I was the one who treated Mr. Qianshi's wound. Chapter 2942 The Fall of a Deity 4 Sponsored content. In that brief exchange, everything finally fell into place for Di Fui. He knew what she meant on the scrunched paper. If only he waited an hour more. She must have been eager to explain to him about her hasty departure from the wedding. She tried contacting him via the directed audio spell that they shared and tried to tail his men. She even tried to collect information about his whereabouts. She just wanted to see him again. However, he never gave her a chance. Audiobook. The boy was surprised to see National Master D tearing up in public for the first time. He stared blankly at the door, seemingly preoccupied. Time was almost up, and the door could be seen closing, bit by bit. The boy seemed relieved as he announced, "Time is almost up, and the door will be sealed soon. I will open it again in a month." But before he finished speaking, he was caught by surprise. A moment ago, National Master D was somewhat unresponsive to what the guard had been telling him. However, in a brief moment he suddenly dashed through the door before it was completely sealed, leaving the boy in bewilderment. Download our sponsor's game and get $30 reward. Remove ads? Di Fui found himself running through the Forbidden Land of God. He tried to sense his surroundings and knew for certain that Gu Shijio should be right ahead of him. As he rushed forward toward Gu Shijio, he had not paid any attention to the scenic night view around him, or even wondered why he was not injured or attacked by a fierce creature yet. Fortunately, there was no disruption along the way. There was only one thought on his mind. Wait for me, Audiobook. You have to wait for me. If he could still feel her presence, it could mean that she was not immortalized yet. There was hope. Perhaps she was severely injured and needed to rehabilitate. Maybe she would just fall into another long slumber, just like the days when she was dormant. A god was supposed to be immortal. How could she become immortalized? He tried to convince himself that he must have mistaken her messages. Download our sponsor's game and get $30 reward. Remove ads? A god would only fall into a dormant state, but should not die. When she said about running out of time, maybe she meant that she was expecting another long slumber, and that the next awakening might be many, many years later. Regardless, he wanted to stay by her side until she woke up and would never let her go again. People only thought about her as a supreme being, but Di Fui knew that deep down, she was also a little girl who was always craving for food and sleep. A normal girl who was afraid of being alone. He had seen all of her soft spots and weaknesses. He was reminded of the look she gave him when she asked for one more drink together in the desert. She looked like a child who was about to be abandoned. He honestly thought that she was playing tricks with him again, so her appeal was answered with an ice-cold rejection. She must have been feeling really sad at that moment. How could he be so cruel to her? Di Fui closed his eyes in utter remorse as the pain in his heart almost choked him. Audiobook, download our sponsor's game and get $30 reward. Remove ads? I know my mistake. Please forgive me, will you? You have to wait for me. All of a sudden, something caught his attention, so he looked up and saw the grand hall that was hovering in the sky, not too far away. The place was overwhelmed with streaks of 7-colored rays while the night sky was glowing with utmost brilliance. She was there. He finally found her. Nervously, his legs started to grow soft to the point where he found it difficult to keep his balance. Nevertheless, he tried to keep his composure and stay focused. With a leap, he went straight to the top of the hall. Download our sponsor's game and get $30 reward. Remove ads? From his current vantage point, the night sky was gorgeous, with billions of stars. Being on top of the hall immediately exposed him to the boundless void of the universe. The path that led him to the lotus altar was paved with blood-red lotus flowers that made it look like a somewhat dreamlike scene. A beautiful place of utter dreariness. He gazed into the boundless horizon, and was immediately captivated by a sense of desolation. She was sitting right there on the lotus altar. Her delicate face had turned icy cold, and her aura no longer carried the same liveliness that it used to possess. Her hands were pinched together for a spell, but it was in a rather unusual manner. Faint lights could be seen exiting her body and slowly entering the surrounding circle of 7-colored rays in front of her. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 2943. The fall of a deity. 5 streaks of faint light were being channeled away from her body slowly, and became immersed in the surrounding 7-colored ray. The aura of the creator of the universe was in abundance, filling the starry sky with her purest power. The stars continued to shine in dazzling glitters above, but the brighter the starlight, the weaker her breathing became. Di Fui's heart sank into an abyss of hopelessness all of a sudden. In a desperate attempt to keep her back, he rushed forward to get to her, but was immediately obstructed by a mysterious force. He wanted to wake her up from her stillness, but was nowhere near enough her due to the hindrance. Trembling, he tried to keep his hands steady to perform a few spells. However, none of them worked. The array formation surrounding her was built with strong defenses, thus blocking his entry. Within the circle, her breathing gradually became weaker to the point that it was almost unnoticeable. Even from afar, he could already how ashen her face had become. Her cherry lips had lost all its colors, and he could see that there was a layer of ice around her eyes and eyelashes. Afraid of losing her, he started to experience waves of anxiety rushing throughout his body. Audiobook, please don't do anything silly. Come out here to me. He ceaselessly tried everything he could to break the barrier. Come out here. See what I have brought you. Your favorite sour plum wine. Even though he was trying to shout as loud as he could tell that he could not speak clearly because of the agonizing pain he was experiencing. This is the best that I have made so far. You have yet to taste it. Please, will you please come out? These bottles of wine are all yours. I shall drink with you, as much and as long as you want. She once told him very proudly that she had a sensitive nose for wine. In fact, nothing could stop her from getting to a good bottle of wine. With only a sniff, she could locate any good wines within miles of her location. In a desperate attempt to catch her attention, he smashed a few bottles of wine on the ground to infuse the air with its sweet scent. In the past, she would rush to him and address her utmost disapproval. However, to his dismay, she was still on the lotus altar and did not react at all. Meanwhile, her power was still flowing away in a continuous stream. The temperature started to drop even further, but she seemed unbothered. In stillness, she sat like a statue that was devoid of any sign of life. Di Fui was aware that Gu Shijie was not someone who was generally accustomed to the cold. Even the slighted drop in temperature would immediately prompt her to seek warmth. He wished he could be there by her side to warm her up when she needed it most. All alone, she sat in the ice-cold array formation. Even though Di Fui could see her, he felt as though they were miles apart. It would seem that she was unreachable. He stood on the edge of the star formation, helpless, watching as his spells were unfortunately bounced off by the mysterious force. He kept his eyes on her all the time and noticed, bit by bit, that her body started to turn transparent. Instantly, she became barely visible, as the surrounding streaks of 7-colored rays shone brighter. Under the intense light, it looked as though she would vanish into thin air at any time. The feeling was too surreal. Her life was coming to an end, and the realization shook Di Fui to his core. His mind was completely blank, and he could hardly breathe. Desperately, he tried everything he could to break into the wizardry barrier, but all of his attempts were in vain. Agio! Agio! Let me in, will you? Let me in. Apparently, she could no longer hear him, so none of his cries were heard. He had been tirelessly shouting her name to get her attention, but she remained completely still. After losing all of her senses, it was only a matter of time before she would disintegrate into dust. He would never be able to find her again. Realization dawned upon Di Fui all of a sudden, thus shattering his faith completely. In despair, he tried everything that he could to get into the wizardry barrier. Chapter 2944. The Fall of a Deity 6. In despair, he tried everything that he could to break the wizardry barrier. His voice trembled with fear and panic as he continued to call out to her desperately. If only he could break into the wizardry barrier. He needed to get to her to give her a warm hug and possibly convince her to stay. She must be feeling very cold now, so a long, warm hug was very much needed. She also said that she was scared. That would mean that she needed him to be by her side. Thoughts exploded in his head and wreaked havoc in his chest. It would seem that fear had swallowed him whole, but in his desperation, he seemed to have provoked the awakening of a hidden force in his body. A sudden thought flashed in his mind, and gave him a brief idea of how to break the wizardry barrier. Without any delay, he began to perform the spell. He bit his index finger to allow blood to start oozing out as he began reciting some complicated incantations with blood on his finger. After that, he placed his palm on the seemingly indestructible wizardry barrier, and surprisingly was able to make a small hole. Although the opening was small, the newfound sense of hope was tremendous. He eagerly tried to tear the hole to form a wider opening. Nevertheless, the very edges of the opening seemed to be saber-toothed. As soon as he touched it, it felt like sharp teeth were sunk deeply into his skin. Blood was dripped all over his hands, but he could not care less about the physical pain. Determined, he screamed at the top of his voice and went full force into breaking it without holding back. Bang! The whole wizardry barrier was shattered. Di Fui made his way in hastily. In an instant, the entire lotus altar became vividly lit, brightening up the starry sky with dazzling streaks of light. He finally saw her up close and noticed that she looked the same, albeit with less visibility. Her eyelashes were invisible, making her look like an exquisitely crafted crystal statue. Furthermore, after a distinct sound of shattering glass, she became entirely invisible. Piece by piece, she dispersed into streaks of light, and was spread into the vast sky. She no longer existed. Agio! Di Fui cried out loud at the top of his voice, blowing the surrounding clouds away by the powerful force. He reached out to the fragments of light, but he knew that he would never be able to collect the pieces back into one. He could not believe it. She had yet to taste the finest wine that he had made for her. She had yet to see his set of wedding robes. She never knew that he had also made her a customized wedding gown for their real wedding. She did not know that the coincidence by the hill was entirely made up. He asked his servant to pretend to be the little princess. She was not told that she was the only one that he had ever loved. There was never anyone else. The only reason that he insisted on the dissolution of their discipleship was so that he could officially pursue her as a man would. He already made a comprehensive plan for it. She must have thought that he hated her as she spent her last days in solitary. Although she was the creator of the universe like everyone else, she was afraid of the cold, of hunger, and of death. She had written her feelings on the scrunched-up paper. He wanted to be with her. In fact, he held that he had sent her to her death. so it was his responsibility to do something about it. Agio, it must be a lonely path in the afterlife. What if I come with you? He whispered softly. Soon, he raised his palm to gather a striking source of 7 colored rays over his head. Eyes closed, he then aimed the light toward his head in a suicide attempt. All of a sudden, a gentle gust of wind blew by. A tantalizing scent wafted with the breeze, reminding him of someone he used to know. Instantly, he opened his eyes and chased after the wind, rather intuitively. As soon as he touched a wisp of wind, his whole body was lit up. Pieces of memories started flooding into his mind involuntarily. He finally remembered that he was the master of the heavenly law. He recalled a little girl who was always by his side in his past life. She was supposed to have died, but he turned her fate around and surrendered himself instead. Chapter 2945. The Fall of a Deity 7. Fortunately, one piece of his soul remained, so he was reincarnated, and their paths crossed again. He died for her the last time. This time around, her life ended early because of him. It seemed that one could not get what was denied by destiny. He looked at the vast starlit sky and started contemplating. After a while, he started performing a series of spells. Swirls of 7 colored rays began to surround him, sweeping his robes in the gusts of wind. He made some movements, and the stars were rearranged accordingly, like chess pieces on a board. At that moment, it seemed that a wisp of wind that he captured from before was encapsulated by a streak of 7 colored rays, and flashed into the dark sky before disappearing entirely. The series of spells that he cast was obviously very physically demanding. He was already looking pale at that point. Agio, after my tragic immortalization, I have spent thousands of years collecting pieces of my broken soul to become a whole again. You can do it too. I will find you no matter where you are. I hope we can both be free from the entanglement of our responsibilities. You will no longer be the creator of the universe, and I shall not be the master of heavenly law. The starlit sky was endless, but it did not stop him from waving his sleeves to redirect the light of as many stars as he could into a swirl, and sent the streak of light right out into the boundless void. The forbidden land of God used to be a very private place. Only a few people knew about it in all 6 worlds. The place was widely popularized due to an accidental encounter. When Di Fui passed by the place about a year ago, he noticed that the clouds around the place seemed rather odd. He followed his instincts and entered the place, only to realize that it was more than what it seemed to be. There was a tall gate made entirely of emerald jade, with a sign that said, "The Forbidden Land of God." A gate made of jade was sealed, and 2 creatures were assigned to guard the door. They carried the appearance of humans, which were actually their evolved figure. In fact, they were both actually crane-like creatures. From the children, he found out a little bit about the place. It was the birthplace of the god of creation, and the entire place was filled with many dangers to stop people from breaking in. If the violator insisted, he or she would be doomed by a series of strange disasters. Upon learning about the information, Di Fui had an immediate aversion to the place and decided to leave. However, before he went away, the 2 crane boys stopped him and made an insane request to erase his memory about the place, claiming that it was a required procedure. The end result was that the 2 creatures reverted to their former forms as cranes, as Di Fui thought that they needed a lesson. He was very against the idea of having his memory erased by someone else. In another coincidence, Tu Shanning once went into the place as well, and was pursued by the cranes. Driven by frustration, she managed to make one of them surrender to her and took him back. She fed the crane with a miraculous elixir, and gave it some additional herbs. Surprisingly, the crane managed to transform into its human form again. The boy had rarely come across others of its kind. Getting into the monster kingdom was like a dream come true for him. He befriended many and became less cautious about what to say and what not to say. That was how more and more people got to know about the Forbidden Land of God. Therefore, the secret became widespread among members of all 6 worlds. Anyone with a certain degree of social status knew about the place. Aroused by curiosity, people started to swarm to the place to find out about its secret, but none were able to make it in. As soon as they approached the magnificent jade door, their bodies started to ache. and those who insisted on venturing were all turned into dust. As the death toll rose, many started to fear for their safety. Over time, the place returned to its usual serenity. Today the place was filled with curious crowds again. Utterly worried, the oddities around the six worlds had prompted the people to relate the incidents back to the creator of the universe. All the rulers from each kingdom paid a visit to the Tianyin Valley right away, but were surprised by the absence of the wizardry barrier that used to secure the place. Meanwhile, Fan Qianshi frantically rushed out from the valley, all the way to the forbidden land of God. Chapter 2946. The Fall of a Deity. 8. Baffled, the leaders of each kingdom followed Fan Qianshi toward the forbidden land of God. When they arrived, the jade door was sealed. Additionally, instead of guarding the entrance, the crane boy was seen shivering in a corner. Desperately, Fan Qianshi lifted the boy and started questioning him. "Where is my master?" The crane boy was about to cry at any second. The Divine Lord. The Divine Lord had made her way in. She did not look well and was staggered as she walked in. She had forcefully opened up the door and went right in. I did not dare to stop her. Not long after that, National Master D arrived as well. He went into the place before the door was sealed. I could not stop him either, so I informed you about it. I kept hearing weird noises from the inside. It was quite alarming. The crane boy was quite incoherent in the delivery of his message, but they got his point. The crowd looked at one another in consternation. The Emperor Immortal frowned and continued to question the boy. Only the creator of the universe is allowed to enter the place, right? If no one else was permitted to enter, how did National Master D make his way in? The boy shook his head helplessly, for he was equally baffled. Someone suddenly added, "Could National Master D be one of the creators of the universe as well? I was told that there was more than one creator in ancient times." "Nonsense. There is only one God of creation. My master is the only one. Who do you think Difui is? Is he even worthy?" Fan Qianshi raised his voice to put an end to the young immortal's wild speculation. Consequently, all the rulers were quite offended by the harsh remark. To them, Difui was their leader, so any disapproval against him would naturally be offensive. They wanted to argue back, but were stopped by the deadly look in Fan Qianshi's bloodshot eyes. All they knew now was that two very important people were inside, and the weird noises did not seem to stop. They decided to wait outside the door for the final outcome, as there was nothing else that they could do for the time being. Meanwhile, the rulers were still in touch with their men in the respective kingdoms. They all shared the same observations. As soon as the creator of the universe entered the forbidden land, the scale of the catastrophic disasters became very much toned down. The rain of blood was less violent, and the earthquakes came to a stop. Water started to flow and nourish the dried, cracked lakes. Were there creatures in the forbidden land of God the ones who were causing the trouble? Did the creator of the universe go in there to take care of it? They all knew that the door would remain sealed for another month. So the rulers decided to camp there and prepare for a month-long wait. There was nothing they could do in their respective kingdoms, anyway. Might as well camp here and wait for the latest information. Also, it was a chance for them to display their loyalty to the creator of the universe and the master of the six worlds. Everyone stayed calm and composed except Fan Qianshi. He was either in deep thought or desperately trying to push his way through the door. At first, they tried to talk him out of the foolish attempt. However, he did not care to listen to any of it, so they decided to just let him be. There was nothing he could change anyway. Generally, the impression that the people had about Fan Qianshi was rather complicated. 2 years ago, he ruined the wedding between the Divine Lord and Difui. In relation to that, his inappropriate affection for his master was no longer a secret. His master's utter disapproval of his feelings was widely known as well. For the past 2 years, he had been living a secluded life. His presence in public would always stir up unwanted attention. People often compared him to Difui, but Fan Qianshi was never the favorable one. What he had done to his master was frowned upon, and his feelings for her were compared to a hideous toad lusting after a swan's flesh. Of course, Fan Qianshi was not aware of these gossips. He was nonetheless aware of the general attitude that people had toward him. Usually he did not care about these people and what they thought of him. However, the long wait was starting to get boring, so the people needed something to talk about. Needless to say, he became the subject of much local gossip. Chapter 2947 The Fall of a Deity 9 These people gossiped very softly, and most of them even used directed audio messages. Little did they know that Fan Qianshi was gifted with an excellent hearing. Now that his spiritual power was already at the level of a great deity, his hearing became incredibly sensitive, much more powerful than any ordinary being. He could even hear conversations that took place 100 meters away from him. This man is so overrated. He even used his feelings to manipulate his master by attempting to kill himself. Otherwise, the union between the Divine Lord and National Master D would not have been ruined. The Divine Lord has not been treating him quite the same in the past 2 years. I heard that the Divine Lord even tried to expel him. However, she would not have anyone to take over her role. The Divine Lord is the creator of the universe, a figure of immortality. She doesn't need to look for someone to keep her legacy going. However, if she were looking for a successor, it would be National Master D. I heard that the Divine Lord has been following him for 2 years now. I agree with you. The forbidden land of God only allows the creator of the universe to enter. Others are never permitted to get inside, regardless of their power or status. We could not even get close, but National Master D is in there as we speak. Obviously, the creator of the universe has taught him something we do not know. Perhaps, she has already appointed him as her successor, which explains why he could enter so easily. Brother, you have a point. In this case, Mr. Qianshi seems quite pathetic. Maybe he will always only be known as a disciple of the creator of the universe, and nothing more. The contents of their conversation were not exactly pleasing to Fan Qianshi's ears. Irritated, he stared fixedly at the jade door with a wrathful spark in his eyes while clenching his fists. Master, why did you let Di Fui into the forbidden land of God? Master, I am your disciple, and Di Fui is nothing. He cannot simply emerge as your successor. Master, I do not want anything more but to be by your side for as long as I can. I only want to be your disciple. Master, you cannot take away my last hope. Master, please come out and let them know that you care about me. Clarify the situation to them. How did Di Fui enter the forbidden land of God? What could be the reasons if he emerged from within unharmed? Many questions started to pop out in his head. The more he thought about the doubts, the more insecure he became. Suddenly, he was reminded of the candle dragon's egg that was given to him a couple of days ago. His master had not given up on him apparently. The gesture gave him a clear sense of hope. With that, he took a deep breath and started to think aloud. Master will surely be fine. She will definitely make it out, he said to himself and the crowd. He then turned to the jade door and continued his soft utterance. Master, the candle dragon's egg that you gave to me is about to hatch. I will show it to you when you come out. The crowd looked at him in disbelief. A candle dragon's egg that was about to hatch? The Divine Lord had given her disciple a candle dragon's egg. The remarkable gift would be a clear sign that she cared for him. All of a sudden, the crowd broke down in tears amidst their discussions. Everyone was hit by a sudden wave of sadness and grief as tears started to roll in their eyes without any apparent reasons. Soon, everyone was crying. What was going on? They stared at each other helplessly, unsure why they were all crying at the same time. Chapter 2948. The Fall of a Deity 10. At the same time, a streak of 7 colored rays emerged from behind the jade door and flew up straight into the sky. The crowd was bewildered, completely blown away by the series of strange happenings. However, it did not take long for the members of the 6 worlds to report to their rulers. Your Highness, the plants are coming back to life. Leaves start to grow again on the bald trees. Even the flowers are blossoming. My king, the blood rain has just stopped. The sun is out. My emperor, the lakes are filled with water again. How magical. Reports kept pouring in from everywhere. Those were all good news, but the messengers did not make the news sound good at all. They were sobbing while communicating the information. Both the callers and receivers were crying, but neither of them understood why. Tu Shanning, the more knowledgeable among the rulers, spoke. It seems to me like the death of a god has taken place. The crowd was utterly stunned. When a god dies, all living souls will involuntarily weep. Flowers die. Mountains collapse. Rivers dry up. Even the heavens shed tears of blood. Tu Shanning spoke calmly. Nevertheless, the crowd was quick to refute her statement. As the ruler of the monster kingdom, you should stop spreading ominous reports. When these signs were happening, the Divine Lord was on her way into the forbidden land of God. The crane boy saw her. That is right. Moreover, these signs have disappeared. The 6 worlds are stable now. I am not done yet. Frustrated, she continued to speak. When a god dies, her body fades into wisps of wind. In return, the calamities from before will be mended, and the 6 worlds will thrive. In memory of the mighty God, we all weep in her absence. The crowd found her reasoning to be unacceptable. Her statements angered Fan Qianshi. Infuriated, he launched a strike at Tu Shanning. Nonsense. What are you talking about? How can a god ever die? My master will never die. How dare you curse my master with death? He channeled all of his strength into that one strike, and since his spiritual power was already at level 7 of a great deity, he was practically unbeatable. In recent years, he spent a large amount of time around Gu Shijiu, and would hardly show his face in public. He had also concealed his power, so no one knew how great he had become. Their last impression of him was 2.5 years ago, where he appeared to be a mess. Therefore they underestimated him. All the kings and leaders had sworn their loyalty to Di Fui, so naturally, they treated Fan Qianshi like he was nobody. They still thought that Fan Qianshi was only a young inexperienced adult without any power, so they went on and gossiped about him without any restraints, even in his presence. They had no respect for a man who only domineered over others, all in the name of his master. To their utter disbelief, his kung fu was remarkable. Tu Shanning was so severely injured that she almost returned to her original form. Her servants were attacked as well once they realized that their ruler was in danger. She had to utilize all her knowledge of kung fu just to defend herself. None of them saw it coming. They gasped, aghast at his power. The forces of the remaining 5 kingdoms decided to fall back to keep their leaders safe. Nonetheless, some were desperate to seek vengeance for what Tu Shanning had suffered. The emperor of the human world condemned the lethal act. He was close with Tu Shanning, so he had to take a stand on her behalf by expressing his complete disapproval of Fan Qianshi's impetuous act. Eloquently, he was able to express his criticism through reasoning. He said, Mr. Qianshi, you have been so reckless. The Tushan family belongs to one of our most ancient species. Chapter 2949 The Fall of a Deity 11 He said, Mr. Qianshi, you have been so reckless. The Tushan family belongs to one of our most ancient species. There are legends and literature that have been passed down from generation to generation in her family, which remain unknown to outsiders. Also, the 9-tailed fox is gifted with an eye to foresee the future. Tu Shanning carries the blood of her family, so it is not surprising that she knows more than us. She was worried about the God of creation, and seeing the oddity prompted her to share the story with us. She meant no harm, but you chose to deal with it so ruthlessly. Isn't it rude and inappropriate? That is right. We are all worried about the God of creation. How could a few inauspicious words do any harm to the Divine Lord at all? Mr. Qianshi, you are overreacting. Your recklessness has abased yourself as the disciple of the Creator of the universe. True. Mr. Qianshi was too impetuous. He did not behave like the disciple of the Creator of the universe at all. His impulsive behavior must have caused him to become the least favorite person in the eyes of the Divine Lord. Sounds like it. See, if the Creator of the universe knew that she was dying, she would have met up with Mr. Qianshi to discuss his succession. Apparently, she did not tell him anything. Of course she did not tell him anything. The Divine Lord dislikes him for sure. She must be regretting her decision of taking him as her disciple. Let me remind you that National Master D is in there as we speak. The Divine Lord is probably discussing with him about the succession of her role and all of her power. There were hundreds of people present, each with their own opinion. Even as a child, his arrogant character had offended many people before he became a disciple of the Divine Lord. The people only chose to treat him respectfully because they respected the Divine Lord. At present, no one knew if the God of creation was still alive. There was a chance that she was already gone, so there was less reason for them to continue paying him any respect. His impetuous act earlier had resulted in a massive wave of criticism. The remarks of the people were clearly hurtful and unforgiving. Trembling in agony, Fan Qianshi listened on with a heavy heart. Wu Qianyan stood by him regardless of the hostility. Furiously she demanded, "Please stop with the nonsense. The Divine Lord has always been fond of the young master. His knowledge of Kung Fu generally came from the teachings of the Divine Lord, who has always treated him as a disciple. In fact, both of them recently ventured into the lair of the candle dragons to hunt for the egg. The egg was given to the young master as a gift, with clear guidelines on how to hatch the egg. If the Divine Lord did not care about him, why would she risk her life for him? If the Divine Lord really loved her disciple, she would have made him her successor. A candle dragon's egg does not tell us enough. Maybe she only gave it away to him to keep him busy. With a distraction, he would not interrupt her business." The criticism went on and on. Dihao was quite confused by the scene. Since he was clearly looking through his mother's previous life, now that she was immortalized, the playback should have stopped as well, but it did not. It was at this point that he finally realized how hurtful words could be. It was just like cyberbullying in the current era. What Fan Qianshi had gone through was not any less hurtful. Very often, Fan Qianshi's views would tend to the extreme. Also, he had to deal with his sense of inferiority after his confessions were rejected multiple times. Dihao could not help but wonder how he actually felt after listening to the ruthless remarks. Perhaps he would start to have some doubts about his relationship with Gu Shijie, and think that she really looked down on him. Worried, Dihao looked at the jade door fixedly. He knew that Di Fui had already recalled his memory and power as the master of heavenly law, which should be a good thing. If Di Fui emerged with newfound power, Fan Qianshi would immediately assume that his master was already immortalized and pass the role to him. At the very least, he would surely be suspicious of Di Fui's remarkable progress. Chapter 2950. The Fall of a Deity 12. To Fan Qianshi, that would pose as a heavy blow. Soon the sealed door was suddenly opened. A man slowly emerged from behind the door. His body was fully clothed in glamorous purple robes. A mask of ghostly features hung onto his face. They could not see his appearance, but they could tell that the man was indeed Di Fui. He was still the same man, but his aura had totally changed. There he stood, firmly with an aura of mystery and authority. Gleams of auspicious seven-colored rays lit him up, making him look just as surreal as the celestial bodies. He had just become a god. Stunned, some could not help but ask, "Where is the creator of the universe? The Divine Lord?" No one could study Di Fui's expression. They could only hear his voice echoing from within. "The Divine Lord has been immortalized." Dihao watched on and felt helpless. Fan Qianshi's face was ghostly pale with fright at that moment. He stared blankly at the door but without any tears in his eyes. Wu Qianyan's cheeks were already bathed in tears, but seeing Fan Qianshi in his frozen state scared her, so she decided to give his arm a squeeze. "Young master, cry it out. Just cry." Instead of crying, Fan Qianshi started laughing hysterically. His voice was sonorous and resonant, having the force to cross the cloudy sky and perhaps even shatter stones. Without saying anything more, he took a leap and went through the jade door. Wu Qianyan called out loud, "Young master." She followed him through the door. Unlike Wu Qianyan, he was able to make it through. However, when Wu Qianyan got close to the door, her entire body caught fire. Before she even made it through the door, she was already turning into ashes. Di Fui seemed a little absent-minded, though he had just become a god. He certainly did not expect that he would have to deal with the two of them the moment he emerged from the inside. It was already too late for him to save them both. Startled, he clenched his fists in despair. It was already too late to save Wu Qianyan, but there was still a chance to keep Fan Qianshi alive. He was Gu Zijia's only disciple. If anything happened to him, Di Fui would feel even more sorry for her. Instantly, he turned around and went back in. However, as soon as he went in, the door became completely sealed again. Inevitably, the crowd was stunned, and so was Di Hao. At that very moment, the forbidden land of God returned to its usual tranquility. Everyone looked at one another helplessly as no one knew what had just happened. They felt quite guilty, in fact. The 6 worlds were indebted to the Divine Lord for her kindness. She had just passed away, and yet they were already pushing her only disciple over the edge. Also, her only servant was, unfortunately, turned into dust. The ruthless ones, in particular, started to rethink their actions and felt guilty. However, what happened in the past could no longer be changed, not even with their utmost regrets. Hence, they continued to wait outside the door. They did not have high hopes for Fan Qianshi's survival, though. The last time he tried to enter, he was almost burned into ashes as well. Now that the door was shut, how was he going to survive in there for an entire month? Nevertheless, all of their suspicions were wrong. It only took half a month for the door to reopen. Streaks of golden light emerged from within and reached into the sky when it did. As soon as the golden light disappeared, the crowd stood with blank expressions on their face, for they could no longer remember anything about Gu Shijie, the creator of the universe. 2 men walked out from the door, one after the other. One man was clothed fully in black and the other in purple. Both of them were wearing masks to cover up their faces, but did not hide their auras. Next to the man in black, a baby candle dragon paraded in enthusiasm. The crowd was still shocked, as they could no longer remember why they were there in the first place. However, as soon as they saw the men, realization dawned on them all of a sudden. Chapter 2951. The Fall of a Deity. 13. Swiftly they rushed forward and bent their knees. Welcome, Creator of the Universe. And to you, Master of Heavenly Law. Cough. Di Hao started to cough. Alerted, Gu Shijie woke up to check on him. She looked at him and quickly gave him a quick pat on the back. Baby, what is wrong? How did you choke yourself in your sleep? Di Hao was finally able to catch his breath. Feeling overwhelmed, he rushed into his mother's arms and started muttering to himself. Mother, I am so glad you are well and alive. Bewildered, Gu Shijie did not know whether to cry or to laugh. Lovingly, she rubbed his head. Did you dream of me dying? Di Hao said in all seriousness. Mother, you will live on for all eternity. Death will never occur to you. You and your sweet mouth, Gu Shijie teased. She began yawning and looking at the sky. The sky was still dark, and there was no sign of any light on the paper lining of the window. All right, let's get some more sleep. Gu Shijie patted gently on his body before closing her eyes with another yawn. Strangely, she had enough sleep, but she still felt tired. In fact, she had been sleeping a lot lately. It did not take long for Gu Shijie to fall asleep again. Di Hao was tired, but he could not sleep. Troubled, he stared at his mother blankly in contemplation. In her previous life, she had treated Fan Qianshi very well. She must have set up some kind of spell in the forbidden land of God before her immortalization, so that Fan Qianshi could emerge as her successor and become the next creator of the universe. Judging from the consecutive events that occurred after her immortalization, it seemed that Fan Qianshi, Di Fui, and the rest of the people must have forgotten about Gu Shijie as the Divine Lord. Perhaps she was reluctant to see her own disciple turning against Di Fui and for the two to become enemies. It seemed that their memories were erased with good intentions. But of course, all of this was only Di Hao's speculations. At the moment, he felt that he needed to visit the forbidden land of God to uncover more of its secrets. However, first he would need to find the location. The place looked like somewhere the Master of the Heavenly Law ought to know, but its architectural composition and the placement of the star chart were unlike anything he could recall. Di Hao knew about the place where the Master of Heavenly Law lived, and tried to piece the information together, but nothing matched. Helplessly, he closed his eyes and heaved a sigh. If he still had his original power, finding out about the place was not a problem at all. The place had been around for more than thousands of years, but it would be challenging to locate the site solely based on what he saw from the playback images. Perplexed, he was surprised that he got to experience Fan Qianxi's story by the end of the playback, as that was a part that he never asked for. It was a strange encounter indeed. Fan Qianshi must have turned his love into hatred, but that part of his painful memory was erased once he stepped foot into the blinding golden light from the forbidden land of God. How did he remember to hate Di Fui and Gu Shijiu? Perhaps not all was erased. After all, the man was still eager to replace Di Fui. So numerous plots were made to take his enemy's life away once and for all. A thought suddenly inspired Di Hao. Perhaps, the reason he could continue watching the story despite Gu Zijia's demise was that Fan Qianshi was tracing the same dream at the same time, which allowed Di Hao to trace his part of the story as well. He looked at his hands and was impressed by his remarkable tracing ability. Should he try again? The boundless sky was in an elegant shade of royal blue, with countless starlight that twinkled in the distance. Drenched, Fan Qianshi woke up abruptly from his nightmare. The same nightmare had been haunting him for a while now, so the images had gradually become clearer and clearer. Chapter 2952. The Fall of a Deity 14. The same nightmare had been haunting him for a while now, so the images had gradually become clearer and clearer. The dreams became especially intense after he met Gu Shijiu. It was so surreal that it felt like it happened only yesterday. He stared at the starry night sky before raising his hand to take some readings. Fool! What a fool! He scornfully said. Reluctantly, he got up from the bed and tidied up his robes. He turned around and saw a dark shadow lingering in the corner. In fact, it was very well hidden. The darkness was able to conceal its tracks, but not the little source of light on the top of its head. Little Black, get over here, Fan Qianshi demanded. The black shadow made a hiss and did as told, though rather unwillingly. It was the candle dragon. Its current body size was only 1% of its usual size, more or less like the size of a snake. It surrounded Fan Qianshi in a circle before looking up in an arrogant manner, as if it was questioning him why it needed to be around at all. In response, Fan Qianshi gently stroked the little spot of light on its head. The candle dragon was surprised by the sudden gesture, so it retreated. Very quickly, Fan Qianshi grasped it by its overhead light to stop it from backing away. Bastard! Are you responsible for the nightmares I have been having lately? He asked brusquely. He was pulling its light so hard that it almost fell off. In pain, the candle dragon desperately tried to break free by pushing back with its claws, but nothing worked. The more it struggled, the more painful it got. Annoyed, it started making a long, doleful cry in protest. Fan Qianshi seemed to understand its language. As a dragon, you cannot even get your tone right. You sound more like a donkey instead. Have you forgotten what you really are, because you have been too busy being a donkey? What a useless creature. The remark irritated the candle dragon, so it shouted back at him. You left me in the herd of donkeys when I was young. I even took one of the donkeys as my mother. Now you are blaming me for sounding like a donkey? It was you who covered me in the skin of a donkey's skin before letting me out in public, saying that it served as good camouflage. Why are you even complaining right now? Fan Qianshi gazed at it, so it did the same. Helplessly, Fan Qianshi gave in. You are a candle dragon with the attitude of a donkey. If I raised you in a herd of pigs, perhaps you might end up behaving like one, the candle dragon sarcastically remarked. Fan Qianshi had never won an argument with the candle dragon, so he decided that there was no point trying. You are not allowed to use that lousy spell on me that causes me to have nightmares. Otherwise, I will peel off your donkey skin. The candle dragon gently shook the light on its head in disapproval. Actually, I did not mean to give you frightening dreams. My scales are naturally formed with a special ability to rekindle one's deepest obsession. You are obsessed with something, which makes you an easy victim to fall into your nightmares, it patiently explained. With a smirk, Fan Qianshi found its explanation hard to believe. She is not my deepest obsession. My obsession is to become the only man who rules the 6 worlds. He then added, You should stay away from me. The candle dragon was offended. Are you trying to send me away again? Fan Qianshi closed his eyes as he replied. Go as far away as possible from me. I get frustrated whenever I see you. His words were hurtful to the candle dragon, so it decided to leave. I am running away from home now. Don't regret what you have said. Fan Qianshi remained unresponsive. The candle dragon lingered by the edge of the hall and seemed ready to go, but Fan Qianshi remained indifferent to its departure. Suddenly the candle dragon added, Actually, it was not entirely my fault that you had those nightmares. I overused my power, which allowed Dihao to look into parts of your unconscious mind. Chapter 2953. Are you going to betray me? Before the candle dragon finished speaking, Fan Qianshi was already pulling its overhead light again eagerly. Dihao. Can you see Dihao? The candle dragon proudly replied. Yes, I had a coincidental encounter with a spell from his soul. Can you lure his soul here? Fan Qianshi seemed to have a new idea. The candle dragon was perplexed. What are you going to do with the child's soul? I only asked if you can do it. It depends if the opportunity presents itself. I will only be able to do it if he uses the same spell. Give it a try then. Try to lure his soul here and trap him. The candle dragon was quite reluctant though. It had its own principles. An adult's personal grudges should not involve children. What are you going to do with him after I lure his soul here? If his soul is away from his body for an extended period of time, it will cause irreversible damage to his health. Are you going to betray me? Fan Qianshi asked in an ice-cold tone. The candle dragon was intimidated by his ferocity, so it surrendered to him. All right, I will try, but there is no guarantee. Fan Qianshi gave its overhead light a gentle stroke. You only have to do your best. You are the only one I can trust now. Don't try to sweet-talk me. You are also one to dismiss others when their job is done. The candle dragon said, obviously immune to his lavish compliments. Fan Qianshi did not deny. I have used many people and sacrificed many lives, but I have never hurt you, have I? To which the candle dragon answered, but you chose to raise me in a herd of donkeys, all because I was a gift from your master. Can we stop talking about the past? All right, let's see what you can do. If you perform well, you will be rewarded, Fan Qianshi sternly said. When Gu Shijie woke up, Dihao was still sleeping soundly. She did not alarm him and decided to get out of bed first. Most of her attention was spent on her daughter, as the naughty little girl was quite attached to her. Her son, in return, was slightly neglected by her lack of attention. The way that the boy snuggled up to her before she was asleep was a clear sign of the lack of attention he had received. She felt guilty for neglecting him, so she decided to make something good for the boy to eat. It did not take long for her to prepare a few dishes and a soup for him as breakfast. She set up the table nicely before waking the boy up. However, time to get up now. Dihao did not move. His eyelids remained shut, and did not even shift a little. The boy's lack of vigilance came as a surprise to her, as it was not how he normally behaved. She took a closer look and was shocked. Quickly, she tried to check his breathing. Panicked, she could feel her body going numb. Dihao was not breathing at all. There was no breathing and no heart rate. Furthermore, out of the 10 fragments of his soul, only 1 fragment remained. The rest was gone. Gu Shijie was utterly shocked. Her place was secured with the strongest form of wizardry barrier. None of the spirits could make it through the barrier. It was even more secure than being in a safe box. So how did little Dihao's soul go missing? Had he used the soul-wandering spell to go on a mission on his own? It did not seem likely, however. The soul-wandering spell would cause him to lose more than half of his kung fu foundation, not forgetting the damage that the spell would do to his body. Unless very necessary, no one would risk getting their soul injured by wandering around without a body. Dihao was a careful boy with a plan. He would not use the spell without notifying her first. What was going on? When the problem involved someone she cared about, it was difficult for her to stay composed. Especially since it involved her son's safety, she could no longer sit still. Immediately, she gave Di Fui a call. He answered it as quickly as he could. Baby, you are early. Miss me? Gu Shijie was not in the mood for flirting. Something is going on with Hao. Her voice was trembling with fear. Di Fui finally took the call more seriously. What is wrong with him? Don't worry. Stay calm. Speak slowly, he reassured her. Chapter 2954. May Mother live on for tens of thousands of years? Gu Shijiu briefly told him about her observations of Di Hao in the morning. Don't worry. He is a boy of remarkable qualities, so nothing dangerous can ever happen to him. I am going back now. Wait for me. I will be with you soon. His voice was surprisingly comforting, especially when her head was in a swirl of confusion and helplessness. During their conversation, Gu Shijiu could overhear the conversation between Di Fui and their daughter. Yu, come on down. We should go home now. Di Shiyue sounded like she was sobbing. Father, you are finally releasing me from these ridiculously tough practices. It was obvious from the tone of her voice that she had been having a miserable time. Not a day went by without any practice, and the intensity of her training had caused her to feel distressed to the point where she started resenting it. You are dismissed temporarily. Your mother misses you, Di Fui calmly said. May Mother live on for tens of thousands of years. Silly. How could you curse your mother like that? She is going to live longer than that. Long live Mother for tens of thousands of years. The playful interaction went on. Gu Shijiu listened closely to them. She was in a blind panic before she made the call. Nevertheless, listening to Di Fui's little chit-chat with their daughter made her feel much better. Maybe the matter was not as serious as she thought after all. Perhaps he had already figured it all out. Even though she would have loved to continue eavesdropping on their conversation, she ended the call to focus on the boy. She knew one or two things about the soul summoning spell. Without wasting any time, she quickly cast some spells to call for his soul to return to his body. To her disappointment, none of her spells works, and Di Hao's soul still remained largely on the loose. Di Fui and Di Shiyue, on the other hand, were already quickly making their way back. Due to the incredible speed at which they were traveling, everything else passed by like a flash of light. To travel faster, Di Fui was carrying Di Shiyue safely on his back. Father, please slow down. I am feeling dizzy. Shiyue expressed her discomfort. Usually, she would fly on her own. It was rare for Di Fui ever to carry her on his back. Normally, she enjoyed being carried, but this time, he was going too fast. Shiyue, you will have to get used to this as it will occur again in the future. Di Fui said strictly. He did not slow down. Instead, he sped up. Thoughtfully, he offered her a green cloth to cover up her eyes to ease her dizziness. Due to his incredible abilities, Di Fui took less than 2 hours to cover a total distance of 2,000 miles. But during his absence, Gu Shijiu knew that she needed to get things in order on her end. She sent Mu Feng and Mu Lei to the underworld to see if Di Hao's soul had been captured. Meanwhile, Mu Dian and Mu Yin were sent to check on the wizardry barrier to see there was any breach during their rest. As for her, she had to stay behind with Di Hao and keep strengthening his body with an array of spells, so that she would not lose the last fragment of his soul. Seeing Di Fui return meant a lot to her. Relieved, she ran towards him as soon as she saw him. Fui, come and check on him. She tried to stay calm, but the terrified look on her face spilled the truth of how anxious she truly felt. Her fingers went numb, and were already ice-cold. Di Fui grasped her by the hand and gave her a tight hug. Don't be afraid. Di Shiyue removed the blindfold to see her mother, but was distracted as soon as she saw Di Hao lying lifelessly on the bed. She jumped down, and was ready to rush to the bed. What happened to brother? Di Fui had to pull her back. Shiyue, stay where you are. Stand aside and watch. The muscle chimed in and asked, should I bring our young lady outside? The presence of a child could lead to unnecessary trouble. Therefore, the muscle thought that it would be better for the adults if little Shiyue were brought outside. Di Fui disagreed. There is no need for that. Let her stay. Gu Shijiu looked at him in bewilderment, so Di Fui explained himself. Shiyue has to grow up. There is no need for us to keep her away from everything. He then gave her hand a tight squeeze. Quietly, Gu Shijiu agreed, for she understood that her husband was only trying to train their daughter to keep calm in situations such as the one they were facing. Chapter 2955. Is he ever coming back? Apparently, the outing with her father was an experience that shaped Di Zuio's character, for she finally knew how to behave in different situations. Without any instruction, she retreated to a corner so that she would not get in the way. Shiyue will do anything you say. Father, you must save brother, she anxiously said. Di Fui examined Di Hao's body with his unique methods. After a while, heaved a heavy sigh as he explained. His soul is not even in this world. Shocked, Gu Shijio could not accept that the boy was no longer here with her. Her body swayed a little as she lost her balance. Di Fui had to raise his hand to support her. Is he ever coming back? Gu Shijio looked at Di Fui intensely as she asked. Why do you ask? Gu Shijio took a deep breath before looking at their son again with longing eyes. I overheard your conversation. Di Fui did not know what to say. Recently, Di Fui had a long conversation with Di Hao. The boy must have sensed that something was coming, so he needed to leave a clue but did so in an elusive and subtle way. Nevertheless, the two of them had a tacit understanding. Di Fui knew exactly where Di Hao came from, so the boy did not need to express himself in many words to make Di Fui understand. Di Hao shared about his origin from the future, so his involvement in past events meant that there was unpredictability about his changed future. Essentially, he would not be able to stay for too long. From what Di Hao understood, those who come from the future were not allowed to meet their past self. Should that happen, the one from the future would no longer exist in the same timeline. If Gu Shijio got pregnant again, the fetus would be a very primitive form of the boy, which meant that his time in the present timeline would also come to an end. Di Hao had never experienced time travel before, so there was no way he could predict when he would disappear. He needed to give his father a heads up, so that his parents would not be heartbroken when his time here finally came to an end. Finally, Di Hao ended his sharing by saying, Father, when the day comes, do not be sad about the farewell, for I will return to you someday. Gu Shijio was smart enough to figure out Di Hao's origin even without any clear hints. She already had an idea of the truth. Nevertheless, overhearing their conversation only proved that her guesses were right. Nonetheless, Gu Shijio was fond of the boy, so she became insecure when she learned that he might disappear entirely all of a sudden. She tried to avoid getting pregnant, so she had been keeping her distance from Di Fui by sleeping in separate rooms. However, Di Fui was always craving for intimacy. Whenever they stayed together, there was nothing that could stop him from making love to her, except those few days when she became unavailable due to her menstruation. To prolong the pregnancy, Gu Shijio had to use her daughter as an excuse for her to sleep in her daughter's bedroom. Di Fui thought that their daughter was too soft and weak, so he decided to train her personally. Soon, Di Shiyue grew to become more independent, and when she returned from the training, she expressed her reluctance to share her bedroom with her mother. Therefore, Gu Shijio had to go back into the same room as Di Fui. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, so after 2 days of being away from one another, they had one of the most intense lovemaking sessions in a while. Frankly, she was quite bothered by it. When she noticed that Di Hao had no signs of life, the first thought that popped up in her head was the pregnancy. In fact, it would certainly explain her recent feelings of exhaustion. Quickly, she examined her pulse, but there was no sign of pregnancy. Perhaps it was still in its primitive stage. Her last menstruation was about a week ago, and the last time she had sex was 2 nights ago. Even if she was really pregnant, the fetus would only be 2 or 3 days old, so there would not be any signs at the moment. The more Gu Shijio looked at Di Hao, who was lying lifelessly on the bed, the more insecure she became. Chapter 2956. The scene had to be recreated. Was she pregnant with the boy already? If she were pregnant, then the two were certainly sleeping together very closely last night. Could the proximity have forced his soul to be absorbed into the fetus? Would he be the same after she gave birth to him? Perhaps it was more likely that he would not remember anything. In her head, she was entertaining all sorts of blind and disorderly conjectures that were now bottled up inside her. Feeling overwhelmed, she finally decided to share her thoughts. Di Fui examined her pulse at once. His medical abilities were more or less on par with hers, but he had a much greater spiritual power at the moment, so his examinations would be more accurate. You are not pregnant, he confidently concluded. Gu Shijio was relieved for a moment, but soon became even more perplexed. Shijio, tell me everything that happened last night between you and the boy. Di Fui still had a gut feeling that something was missing. Without wasting any time, Gu Shijio told him everything that she could remember. As far as Di Fui understood, the boy actually had the mentality of an adult, even though his body was restricted to the size of a toddler. Therefore, he knew that the boy would not insist on sleeping with his mother if there was nothing going on. Di Fui decided to test Di Hao's spiritual power, and the result supported his speculation. Di Hao's spiritual power was severely drained. It seemed that he had performed some sort of physically demanding spell. What had he done? Di Fui then turned his attention to Gu Shijio and saw the dark pouches under her eyes. He asked, "Did you not sleep well last night?" "I slept very well. I have never slept so well in a long while," she said. She knew that her sleep last night was deepened into a long and undisturbed one. Nevertheless, she still felt tired, even though she had a good sleep. Although she could not recall the specifics, she knew that she had a long, long dream throughout the night. But there was nothing she could remember as soon as she woke up. Di Fui pulled her hand over and said, "Let me have a look." By this time, Gu Shijio knew that Di Fui already had some clues about what might have happened, so she agreed to let him continue his examinations. A moment later, Di Fui let go of her hand and frowned as he processed the results. He could tell that Di Hao had used some sort of spell that allowed him to read Gu Zijia's memory, but it was not a simple memory extraction. The spell was much more powerful than that. It was his first time encountering such a spell, but he felt something strangely familiar about it, like he had once studied the same spell before. It must be a skill that was especially for the master of the heavenly law. The spell required the purest power of one's soul, which would cause his soul to leave his physical body while the spell was ongoing. In order for him to understand the entire incident, the scene had to be recreated. Therefore, Di Fui asked Gu Shijio to lie down on the bed again. As for him, he adjusted his body size to that of a toddler, just like Di Hao. He climbed onto the bed and lay by her side, where Di Hao pretended to sleep last night, which was right beside Gu Shijio. Then, he was mimicking Di Hao's gestures and expressions. Gu Shijio quietly followed. When Di Hao lay by her side, all she could feel was a rush of maternal love. It did not feel quite the same next to Di Fui. She would pinch Di Fui's adorable face right now if they were not in a rush to search for their child. "Shijio, take a rest as you did before. It is all right if you cannot fall asleep, as long as you control your breathing and stay focused." Gu Shijio did as told. Soon she could feel a stream of power flowing in her body. Some fragments of her memory were about to be extracted. Shocked, she opened her eyes to stop the extraction. "Are you reading my memory?" Di Fui shook his head and whispered to himself, "No, that's not what I am doing." Gu Shijio remained confused. Perhaps, no matter what Di Fui performed on her, she would always be alert. Finally, Di Fui was reminded of a very strange method, so he put it to use. It did not take long for Gu Shijio to fall into a deep sleep under this spell. In her mind, she felt as if she had fallen into a dream. Nevertheless, Di Fui stopped using the spell before she had the time to figure out her dreams. How Air's consciousness has collided with the Candle Dragon's dream-entering spell. That is how he was taken away, he concluded. Furious, Gu Shijio asked, "Is Fan Qianshi behind this?" Fan Qianshi was the only one known to own a Candle Dragon. Chapter 2957 The Interception Sponsored Content Remove Ads? Gu Shijio was still quite puzzled by Di Fui's findings. Fan Qianshi is not even here in this world. How did he send the Candle Dragon over? Since their last encounter with Fan Qianshi, Di Fui had come up with a new array formation, and sent his men to every corner of the continent to set it up. Therefore, any violation at the border by an unknown visitor would immediately trigger an alarm. By right, Di Fui and Gu Shijio would be the first to know if someone had entered. Fan Qianshi was long gone from the continent, so if he really intended to sneak back in, there was no way they would not know. The Candle Dragon was the only species that can travel through different time zones and places with its dream-entering spell, which is remarkable, to say the least. It can use the spell to extract information on one's previous life, or absorb one's soul from their dreams, Difui explained. Di Shuyue felt a little uneasy listening to what Difui had told them. Absorb one's soul? Has it swallowed brother's soul? Will brother ever come back to us? Sponsored content. Remove ads? No, the candle dragon does not consume one's soul. What it does is to do as told and take away any soul that its master intends to capture. We need to find the candle dragon to find Di Hao. Gu Shizhou answered her daughter's confusion. I did not realize that you know so much about candle dragons. Of course, I know that it will absorb every fragment of one's soul, leaving nothing behind. She suddenly stopped talking as the realization struck. There was a piece of Di Hao's soul left in his body, which did not seem entirely like a candle dragon's style. Difui gently tapped his fingers on the table while he processed his thoughts. Hao Er is no ordinary person. Perhaps his kung fu allowed him to struggle against the candle dragon, thus leaving a piece of him behind. Gu Shizhou was irritated. Fan Qianshi must be the culprit. That bastard. He never leaves us alone. If anything happens to Hao Er, I swear that I will skin him. Sponsored content. Remove ads? In a far, far away land, Fan Qianshi started sneezing very hard 2 times in a row. With his brows furrowed, he looked at the candle dragon with eyes full of doubt. The dragon had its head down rather cowardly. Fool, how dare you curse me in your heart? I did not. The candle dragon defended itself. Fan Qianshi knew the candle dragon well. It was very stubborn but was always responsible for the choices it made. It knew its priorities and would never lie to him. However, the sight of the dragon still angered him. The candle dragon's dream-entering spell intercepted with Di Hao's last night, so their plan should have worked. Sponsored content. Remove ads? However, it suddenly became distracted in the middle of the spell. The look in its eyes showed that it had lost its focus. It seemed the candle dragon became horny as its saliva could be seen drooling from its mouth. Read more chapters at List Novel. Luckily for Fan Qianshi, he realized that something was not right and immediately gave its lantern a hard clasp. He needed to keep its soul in place before someone else took it away. However, even after the completion of the spell, it still appeared quite lost. What a beautiful creature. She kept blinking at me. Such beautiful eyes. Who did you see? Fan Qianshi was baffled. It was a female candle dragon, with pink scales all over its body. Her eyes are fiery red. There is even a signature heart-shaped scale on her forehead. Fan Qianshi was speechless. Where is Di Hao's soul? Have you brought him over? Fan Qianshi was anxious to know if all of his effort of catching Di Hao's soul went to waste. It seemed the candle dragon completely failed its mission. The candle dragon seemed quite embarrassed as it replied. I am a male candle dragon, so I need to behave like a gentleman. How could I compete against a female? She intercepted while I was trying to extract Di Hao's soul. I had to let her have him. Fan Qianshi tried to suppress his anger. Where did the female candle dragon come from? Where did the interception happen? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 2958. The Interception 2. In a desert, where the vast land of sand was stretched over thousands of miles. It appeared right there, in the middle of the golden sand. I have never seen such a beautiful candle dragon in my life. It felt like a dream. The candle dragon recalled its beautiful encounter like reciting a poem. Meanwhile, Fan Qianshi was getting more impatient. Which desert? About that, I did not pay much attention to my location. That reply was the last straw for Fan Qianshi. He could no longer hold back his frustration, and decided to vent his anger on the candle dragon. The candle dragon was undoubtedly guilty of its foolish behavior, but the more it listened to Fan Qianshi's criticism, the more frustrated it became as well. That is enough. When will you ever stop? Like I told you, the method may or may not work. If you think I am useless, I will leave right now. It then walked away in a fury. Fan Qianshi said nothing more. The candle dragon was so challenging to handle. Quietly, he sat down and stared blankly at the starry sky in contemplation. At that time, the candle dragon had retreated into a corner. Quietly, it looked at its master who sat in solitary like a jade statue, as if the entire world had just abandoned him. The sight made the candle dragon feel a bit pitiful for the man. Therefore, it decided to talk to him. I do not quite understand why you insist on making them your enemies. Can't you live in peace with one another? Over the past few days, you have not troubled them in any way, and they did not trouble you either. Fan Qianshi did not even look back at the candle dragon as he replied. You're so naive. They have not found their way to me because they are not as powerful as me. Once they have gathered enough strength, or once Difui has become the master of heavenly law, they will surely get in my way. I would rather get rid of them while they are still weak than deal with them later when they have regained their power, he scornfully said. What about Gu Shijio? Are you planning on killing her too? The candle dragon asked. Fan Qianshi kept staring at the stars. He replied, I will kill anyone who is in my way, including her. The candle dragon did not take his words very seriously, however. You had so many chances to kill her before. Why didn't you do it? Those were not the right time. Fan Qianshi icily said. After pondering over the many opportunities that he had, the candle dragon slowly added, although I do not know where the desert is, it does not mean I cannot find it. How can you find it? How long do you need? Fan Qianshi grabbed its little lantern anxiously. Don't you get too excited. The desert is not in this particular region. I need to find it with the help of some spells. It might take me about half a month. Fan Qianshi was not very impressed by the response. That's such a long time. It is not that long, master. You should know that there are millions of continents out there. It will be more difficult than finding a needle in the deep sea. Before it finished speaking, Fan Qianshi was already rushing it. What are you waiting for? Start finding it now. It was a vast, desolate land of sand, where the scorching sun was merciless. It was the time of the day where the sun was the brightest. The sand was burning hot under the heat, and there was nowhere to look for shelter. Di Hao was hiding in a hole with a camel bone on top of his head as a temporary shelter. With his teeth gritted, he asked the fatty that was squatting next to him. The sun has been there for 5 days and 5 nights straight. When will it ever set? This does not make any sense. The fatty next to him was a pink and chubby dragon. It had a pair of big round eyes decorated with pretty lashes and distinctive double eyelids. On top of its head, there was a pink lantern that swayed with its every movement. Di Hao recognized it as a candle dragon, though it looked a little mutated. It was chubbier and shorter than a regular candle dragon. Chapter 2959. Nothing felt right for him. The little fatty was drenched in sweat too. The sun never sets. It has been and will always be right up there. Di Hao could feel his head spinning already. To make matters worse, he was there as a spirit. Under his current soulful circumstances, he preferred the shade to the light. An average human soul would not even make it in the light. It would perish as soon as it touched a glimpse of sunlight. But Di Hao was the master of heavenly law, which granted his soul an immense power to stay alive even under the sun. He could even make himself a physical body solely by solidifying elements from the air. No one could possibly tell the difference. For the past 5 days, Di Hao was stranded in the desert. Nothing felt right for him. He became even more frustrated when he saw the little fatty next to him. If it had not intercepted him, he would have long discovered where Fan Qianshi was hiding. All of his problems would have been solved right there. When he noticed that something was not quite right, he decided to use the tracing spell to check it out. Coincidentally, his spell collided with the dream-entering spell from the candle dragon. Di Hao had a general idea of how the spell of a candle dragon worked, so he immediately realized that Fan Qianshi must be behind it. He had quite a hard time trying to find out Fan Qianshi's location, so the interruption was an opportunity he could use. The boy acted as if he was struggling just to cause a scene. However, seeing his struggles prompted the candle dragon to comfort him. It promised that no harm would be done. Its master was only asking him to go as a guest. Dihao did not trust its words, of course. So in order to make his struggle look more convincing, he continued to act like he was trying to break free throughout the journey, only on a milder scale. They were passing by the desert just when he thought that he had put up enough of a show and was ready to fight for real. But it was then that the pink candle dragon suddenly jumped in. It decided to help. The pink candle dragon's kung fu was not very strong, so it could not be considered as an opponent at all. Nevertheless, the black candle dragon that belonged to Fan Qianshi was obviously awestruck at the sight of the pink candle dragon. In an unexpected twist, the black one decided to back off like a gentleman with its eyes glistening with love. Therefore, Dihao was left stranded here in the desert, along with the pink candle dragon. The candle dragon was only trying to be helpful, though it was not what Dihao wanted. Nonetheless, he never complained about it and thanked the candle dragon for its interception. It did not take long before he realized the severity of his situation. He was told that the sun never sets in the desert, and that he would never be able to leave. The place was so strange, and so was the fatty. When Dihao first arrived, the fatty thought it was invisible to him. It squatted right in front of him and carefully studied his body from head to toe with both eyes locked on him in close proximity, like it was studying a very rare specimen. Dihao did not find it comfortable, so he politely asked what it was up to. At the time, the fatty seemed rather shocked by the question. "Wait, you can see me?" Dihao was, in turn, surprised by its lack of observation. How could he not see its big body lying around in front of him? Its body was so huge that it covered half of his sight. He assured the candle dragon that he could see it, entirely, even the lantern that was hanging on top of its head. He was pretty sure that his answer was ordinary and straightforward, which was nothing to be excited about, but the fatty reacted very differently. Enthusiastically, it rose into the sky and made a swift circle in the air. It leaped into action with so much energy that the nearest sandy hill to them had collapsed. Even the ground was still a little shaky. Chapter 2960. What kind of place could it be? Yay. He can see me. He can even understand me. Oh my. Dihao was speechless by the candle dragon's apparent overreaction. It was not surprising for a master of the heavenly law like Dihao to understand many languages, which included the language of animals. It was only natural for him to understand a candle dragon. Dihao thought of it only as a normal interaction, but the candle dragon was so hyped like it was high on drugs. It got so excited that it started circling him in a happy dance. The unnecessary celebration had also caused a surge of dust in the air, which ended up in Dihao's nose. Quickly, he stoked it to ask some serious questions, for example, where the place was and in which continent. Helplessly, the pink candle dragon looked at him with an equally confused expression. It did not know either. For as long as it could remember, it had always been in the same desert. It had never attempted to leave, for it could never truly leave the place. To make matters worse, the place was very rarely visited. There was hardly any sign of anyone around. Occasionally, some friars would pass by, but none of them could see or hear it, so the candle dragon was very lonely for a long time. From the friars, it found out that the place was known as the Flaming Desert, which was classified as a forbidden land. No one was allowed to step foot in the desert. The friars only explored the place because they intended to find out the facts behind the flaming sun. But all of them ended up being flamed to death. Those who died in the desert would have their souls stranded in the desert as well until their souls finally perished into oblivion. Only their bones were left behind. When the candle dragon told Dihao that he was stranded in a place with no escape, he did not take it very seriously. He could tell at once that the place was sealed away by a wizardry barrier, and the pink candle dragon was made to be the guardian of the barrier, but perhaps it was unaware of it. The wizardry barrier would not even concern him, but now that he was here, he felt the need to break through the wizardry barrier to escape and return to the Starry Crescent land. He was certain that his sudden departure would definitely alarm his mother and family. They must be nervously trying to find him. His parents' anxiety was the last thing that he needed. Fortunately, Dihao was an expert in breaking wizardry barriers. All he needed was a good rest to regain his strength. When he was energized, the wizardry barrier would not be a problem. Nevertheless, The place was like the flaming mountains. The sun was causing him to sweat a lot, so he had to ask the candle dragon for shelter. Since you are an inhabitant here, do you know about any place that can provide shelter? Please lead me there, so I can rest. In return, I shall free you from this confinement. The candle dragon thought about his proposal and decided to dig a hole into the sand. It managed to make a spacious, hollow place in the sand that could temporarily provide a shelter. This place is cooler. Come on in, it said before jumping into the hole. Dihao did not know what to say. Later, the candle dragon found a large bone in the sand and passed it over to Dihao. This can shelter you from the sun. Dihao accepted the bone and placed it over his head to shield himself from the sun. He did as told and jumped into the hole to escape from the heat. He wanted to wait until sunset before he took a walk around the desert to find the exit, and eventually, break the wizardry barrier. He waited, but the sun never set. He was quite anxious to find that it was still hanging high up in the sky after so many hours. It was then that he asked the candle dragon when the night would come, because the sun never seemed to set at all. To compound his misery, the candle dragon's answer was quite depressing. Night? What is that? From all that I can remember, the sky has always been the same. Apparently, the place had no sunsets. What kind of place could it be? Learning that the sun would never go down, Dihao no longer wanted to wait in the hole. He wanted to leave as soon as he could. The longer he stayed, the worse the situation could be for him. As soon as Dihao crawled out of the hole, he saw a person in a white dress swaying in the distance. She staggered and stumbled through the sand. Violently, her hair and robes danced in the gusts of wind. Dihao was utterly shocked. Mother! It was his mother! Chapter 2961. The obsession. But when he took a closer look at the figure in the distance, he realized that the woman was not her mother. She was the god of creation from the past. There was a clear sign of a divine aura around her. But it seemed as though her power was slowly draining, so she had to retain it forcefully. Dihao was a little lost, for he had just gone through Gu Zijia's past life as a series of images using his tracing spell. The sudden emergence of the god of creation struck him as an unpleasant surprise. The surrounding heat was blazing to the point where there was blood on Dihao's lips. However, even under the scorching sun, the god of creation's body was still covered in a layer of ice. Her hair appeared to be slowly turning silver. She looked up and stared at the blank sky and said, "It is cold. Freezing cold. Where has the sun been?" she murmured. Dihao took a look at the sky and realized that dark clouds were gathering, gradually obscuring the sun. Meanwhile, strong winds started to blow in the area. Surprised, Dihao did not know that the weather in the desert could be so extreme. When the sun was up, the whole place felt like the interior of an oven. But once the dark clouds took over, the temperature plummeted beyond the freezing point. Everything was soon frozen. Even the sand was frozen into solid chunks. His limbs were started to become rigid with ice. Seeing his mother struggling in the cold naturally triggered him to run towards her, but the fatty very soon stopped his attempt. It took a bite on his robes and urged, "Here she comes. Run. We have to go now." Without further ado, it performed the ground drilling and brought Dihao underground. The pink candle dragon looked short and chubby, but its physical qualities were never a barrier to its amazing speed in ground drilling. It did not take long for them to reach deep beneath the ground. In short, the pink candle dragon's ground drilling was very impressive. It could go beyond hundreds of meters underground in an instant, and intended to go even further down. Hey, this depth should do it. Dihao had enough of the drilling, so he pulled its tail to bring it to a halt. No, not here. We will still be frozen. The pink candle dragon continued to drill its way through the ground, all the way until it finally saw the magma within the Earth's crust. It finally came to a stop and made itself comfortable. "We should be safe here," it said while catching its breath. Dihao was dumbfounded. It was clearly overreacting. How cold could it possibly be slightly higher up? Then he recalled the unusual drop in temperature of the surface, and was convinced that the candle dragon might have a point. He remembered that his limbs almost became frozen in just an instant. Nevertheless, The thought of the staggering woman made his heart ache. She reminded him of the creator of the universe who just had ended her apprenticeship with Difui. Was she only an illusion? Or did she really exist? Do you see her very often? Dihao asked the pink candle dragon. Not too often. She reappears every 8 to 10 years. How many times have you seen her here? The pink candle dragon started using its claws to make an estimate. Thousands of times, at least. I have seen her far too many times that I cannot even remember. It then added. She did not show up so often in the beginning, perhaps once in a few centuries. However, her emergence has become more frequent lately. Does the sky turn cold every time she shows up? The pink candle dragon quickly nodded. Yes, she is solely responsible for the extreme temperatures here. Back in the days, the weather used to be less extreme. The desert was not as vast as the current days. But every time she shows up, a little bit about the place changes. She turns the place colder and colder each time she emerges. Nonetheless, the extreme cold had also brought about extreme heat. There used to be rocky hills to provide shelter, but those soon vanished due to the unbearable atmosphere. It is now a wide expanse of flat, sandy land. I have explored the entire desert, but there is not a single place that has shelter. A sudden realization struck. Chapter 2962 The Obsession 2 Sponsored Content Remove Ads? A sudden realization struck. The pink candle dragon looked at Dihao with its curious, big round eyes. Hey, you are still alive. Dihao did not quite get the hint. With clenched fists he asked sternly, should I be dead? The pink candle dragon gave him an honest nod. To be frank with you, I tried to save many lives before, but all of them ended up suffocating to death underground. Surprised, Dihao felt lucky that he knew about ground drilling too. Otherwise, his life would be dependent on the irresponsible candle dragon. Sponsored content remove ads? He found a place to sit and got comfortable. Come. Tell me more about your life in the desert. Be as detailed as possible. The pink candle dragon had no restrictions on privacy. It told Dihao everything that he wanted to know. The candle dragon had been living in the desert for more than thousands, or even tens of thousands of years by now. It had been in existence for a very long time. The desert was originally only a small piece of barren land that was a few hundred miles wide. It could easily run from one end to another. The desolate area used to be covered with a little vegetation back in the day. At least there used to be some greens in a wide canvas of yellow. The sun was much less scorching as well as it rose from the east and set in the west. However, the emergence of the lady had brought about great changes to the place. As far as the candle dragon recalled, the sky was only a little gloomy the first time she showed up. The sun was not entirely obscured behind the thin, dark clouds as it was now. The lady was obviously afraid of the cold, so she opened up her arms to get as much sun as possible. Sponsored content remove ads? It was very rare for the candle dragon to meet anyone in this empty land, so it was excited the first time she showed up. It raced towards the stranger for a brief chat, but she soon disappeared before it got close enough. After some time, the candle dragon finally managed to approach her up close, only to realize that she was just an illusion. Its claws had penetrated through her body like a phantom. Also, the illusion was extremely cold. The candle dragon almost became frozen just by approaching it. The more she showed up, the colder the place became. It was so bad to the point where the candle dragon could feel the frost before the illusion even appeared. To survive, it had to drill into the depths of the earth to keep warm. The pink candle dragon was very lonely and had always wanted a companion. However, its presence was unnoticed by many occasional visitors. They could not see or hear it at all. Even if it were standing in their way, they would bump into it, thinking that they had come across an invisible spirit. Shocked, the next thing they did was to run for their lives. Sponsored content remove ads? There were a few times where people came to patrol the desert just when the lady was about to show up. The pink candle dragon did not want to see them being frozen to death, so it brought them all to the underground. However, they ended up dying from suffocation. This place was a hopeless place. Whoever entered would never be able to make it out. No matter how powerful the visitors were, They would either die from heat, hunger, thirst, or the cold. All in all, the pink candle dragon was the only being that managed to stay alive in the vast desert. Its wish for a companion finally came true. Dihao was here at last. The candle dragon was very grateful for his presence. Like a chatterbox, it would not stop talking. Dihao learned about many things from its generous sharings. There was only one thing that he did not quite understand. I know that the candle dragons live in the high mountains and marshlands. They love to be in the shade and not the sun. Moreover, their eggs can only hatch in specific pools of water, not at room temperature. On the whole, none of the living conditions here can sustain your survival. How did you keep yourself alive so far? The pink candle dragon was just as confused. I do not know really. I have been here for as far as I can remember. Have you always been this big? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Yes. Sponsored content remove ads? Do you have a name? Dumbstruck, the pink candle dragon scratched its head. I think I do. What is it again? Dihao waited patiently for it to recall its name. But as he waited, he noticed that the scales on the candle dragon's head were about to be scratched off. I think my name is Little Pink. It finally remembered. The simple form of its name reminded Dihao of his mother's naming habit. Could the candle dragon be one of his mother's pets? From the images of his tracing spell, his mother once said that every god of creation would carry a candle dragon as his or her pet. She used to have one, but it died during her sleep. Sponsored content remove ads? Perhaps the candle dragon survived after all, and got stranded in the desert. However, if it used to be his mother's pet, it should be able to recognize the lady in white. Its confusion clearly showed that it did not know her at all. At that point, many questions in Dihao's head remained unanswered. Dihao took the time to have a rest beneath the ground. When they resurfaced, the lady was no longer there, and the temperature in the desert rose to an unbearable scale once again. His spiritual power had partly recovered, so he quickly worked on the wizardry barrier so that they could break free. For the past 8 days, he had been remarkably persevering, but not a clue had been found about how to break out of the place. Sponsored content remove ads? He had even tried to go underground. Along with the candle dragon, they traveled for thousands of miles beneath the ground, but to their utter disappointment, they still resurfaced to a vast plain land full of sand. Every way that he thought possible turned out to be useless. It seemed that there was truly no escape from the desert. Half a month flew by, and Dihao became dispirited. There was no water and no food in the desert. Even though his soul could survive without any food, he could not take the heat with the sun beating down on him. Eventually, his powerful soul slowly wasted away under the scorching sun while the heat had caused him a number of repercussions. Fatigued, he now felt suffocated when they were traveling underground. All he could feel was his head spinning as the pressure became unbearable to him in merely a few minutes. However, he would rise to the ground, only to feel like leaving again. The candle dragon noticed that his condition was deteriorating, and was concerned. "Brother D, are you going to die? I tried to save a god before, but he did not last beyond 20 days and was immortalized. His soul did not survive." Sponsored content remove ads? Shut up. Dihao snapped. As the master of the heavenly law, it would be a shame for him to die in a place like this. However, there was no way he could escape, and time was only making him weaker and reducing his chances. The desert was like a monster that devoured any living being that was trapped within it, and it did not seem to give them any chance of escaping. The candle dragon often felt dispirited by the loneliness, but somehow the heat never affected its strength. Perhaps, it was the only species that could survive in the barren land. Everything else would slowly perish. Regrettably, no help was coming for it, and there was no way it could make it out alone. It looked at the sun by the edge of the sky with deep regret. It would not have negotiated with Fan Qianqi's candle dragon if Dihao was going to be stranded here and die. His soul had been away long enough, and his parents must surely be very worried for him. Dihao could only hope that they were facing the changes well. After all, he had already prepared them for the day that he would mysteriously disappear. Maybe they thought that his soul had already returned to where he belonged. Perhaps they would not even go looking for him and let his little body rot away in the absence of a soul. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsors game to support us. Chapter 2964. The obsession. For all of his thoughts at that moment were negative, so Dihao naturally found himself quite depressed. One day, some visitors disrupted their solitary time while Dihao was leaning against the candle dragon and trying to get asleep. A man and a woman showed up, both with seemingly excellent kung fu, at least the level of a mighty immortal. They looked like a couple, as the man had never stopped stroking the woman's waist. The woman enjoyed resting her face on the man's chest, too, though rather bashfully. Dihao could finally feel what the candle dragon felt. The sight of visitors certainly excited him. However, he decided to hold back and observe them first. Meanwhile, the candle dragon just stayed where it was and did not bother. It was invisible to everyone anyway. Its presence would not make any difference. It was quite bothered by the heat in the desert, so seeing two visitors cuddling with one another was quite baffling to it. Don't they feel warm? It turned to ask Dihao. Dihao gave its scaled skin a gentle tap and signaled it to be quiet. The couple did not seem very eager to explore the place. After a quick look around, they seemed only to want to make sure that they were alone. Once they determined that the area was clear, the man made the first move and gave the woman a hard squeeze. Baby, we are finally at a place where no one can disturb us. Let's get hot. Soon, the man began to pant vigorously. He then gave the woman a series of long kisses. Both of them embraced passionately in the desert as they rolled all over on the sandy ground, while eagerly undressing one another. Dihao never saw it coming. Awkwardly, he decided to take the pink candle dragon away from the scene. Let's take a walk somewhere else. Nevertheless, the pink candle dragon was now intrigued, so it refused to go. Hey, what are they doing? Are they fighting? At least they are aware that the place is hot. They are stripped down to nothing. Dihao did not have an answer for its confusion. With a spell, two pieces of handkerchiefs were pulled out from his sleeves to blindfold the pink candle dragon. Little Pink, if you refuse to go, I will never talk to you again, he threatened. The threat seemed to work as the pink candle dragon followed him right away. They did not go far. In fact, they stopped when they could no longer see or hear anything. The pink candle dragon did not think it was a big deal at all. They are just two people messing around. Is there anything inappropriate for us to see? I have seen many of them like that. Some started to fight as soon as they came in. Some took their time and fought later. That was a remarkable piece of information to Dihao. He suddenly thought of something. Were they all couples? A man and a woman? Yes, they all came in pairs, the pink candle dragon answered with a nod. Dihao finally had a clue. Only couples were allowed to enter the desert. Dihao was not involved in any relationship yet, so without the pink candle dragon's interruption, he would never have made it in here. The realization prompted him to give the pink candle dragon a strange look. Innocently, the candle dragon had no idea what was going on in Dihao's head. About an hour later, it was finally time for them to head back. The couple was already done with their activity, and were just sitting face to face and having a talk. From their conversations, Dihao learned about things from the outside world. The continent was called the collateral Shenwu land. The desert lay within the very center of the continent, which happened to be a forbidden area for the inhabitants of the land. In the desert, the sun never set, but the course of the sun remained normal in the outside world. The sun and the moon would rise and set as usual. Life used to flourish on the continent, and the land used to be ablaze with blossoming trees and flowers. It was a lively place where crops continued to grow, and animals lived freely in the wild. All courses of life went on undisturbed. However, as the desert expanded, its unrelenting heat affected the entire continent. Crops were unable to survive and died. Rivers dried, and life was becoming tougher by the day. Many powerful men were dispatched to take a look at the desert, but it was difficult for them to get past the barrier. Even when they did, they never returned. In time, the desert became a deadly territory that only consumed the lives of the people who entered. Not another man was ever sent in again. Sponsored content. Remove ads? Eventually, the king realized that only couples were allowed to enter the desert, especially those who had gone through hardships together. So the king made a rule. When a particular relationship was not blessed, the couple could take the challenge and visit the desert together. If they could make it out alive, the king would personally bless their union and publicly announce them as a newlywed, so no one was allowed to break them apart ever again. In addition, the king would even reward them with money and assets. The couple was the perfect example. They were related as a master and a disciple. The man was a master, known as Fu Xiaotian. The woman was his disciple, known as Lu Yingying. A relationship between a master and a disciple was generally forbidden. Moreover, Fu Xiaotian already had a wife. Sponsored content. Remove ads? His wife was from a family that was well known for spells and wizardry. They used to be apprentices together in the past. In order for him to inherit the secret magic and spells of the family, he decided to pursue her rather consistently. His gesture finally moved her, and they soon became married. He became the son-in-law of the family and obtained what he had always wanted. Fu Tianxiao fully utilized his wife's network to expand his own business. Soon he emerged as a great man admired by many. Many disciples were recruited in the name of his success. He played his role well by showering his wife with love and being a good husband in public. Generally, he was known as a man who was obsessed with his wife and possessed a reputation that was praised by many. However, some people badmouthed him as an idler who only sponged on the wealth of his wife's family. Eventually, he grew sick of the rumors, which consequently made him grow to repel his own wife. Secretly, he started to cheat on her with his disciples. Sponsored content. Remove ads? In order for him to get rid of his wife without making a bad name for himself, he made a plan to frame his wife for cheating on him with one of his disciples. The news spread in the town quickly, making his wife look like a horrible woman for cheating. He did not punish his wife away, nor did he mention about divorcing her. Publicly, he addressed the affair by stating that it was his fault for neglecting his wife, thus leading her to commit in something foolish. He even begged them to forgive his wife and stop talking about it. His public speech had gained him even more popularity by being a good man. His wife, on the other hand, was widely defamed and mistreated by the public. He continued to gather pity by getting drunk every day or bursting into tears as soon as he talked about the affair. All of his efforts added up and made him a good, loving man who had his heart shattered by his cheating wife. Meanwhile, his wife's reputation was utterly damaged to the point where she could no longer tolerate the rumors, so she ended her own life. Sadly, he buried his wife after a grand funeral and forbade anyone from talking bad about her again. He vowed to kill anyone that made the situation worse. Sponsored content. Remove ads? From then on, his reputation as a good husband was well established in society. Everyone thought of him as a loving and responsible man instead of a worthless idler. He also inherited the entire fortune from his wife's family, thus putting him in the prime of his life. The only thing that he was unsatisfied with was his affair with his disciple, Lu Yingying. She inspired into almost all of his bad doings. She loved him wholeheartedly, and the only thing that she had ever asked was for him to marry her, or she would tell everyone what he had done in the past. In order for him to marry her, he agreed to venture into the desolate desert. Usually, they would not do anything too revealing in public, but now that they were alone with no one around to judge them, it was finally time for them to express their yearning desire for one another. After the brief chat, they made love to each other again. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 2966. The Couple's Challenge, 2. The Master, being more senior and experienced, should lead the way. Since he was no longer holding back, she decided to let go of all her worries and savor every moment of their union. As a result, her moans of pleasure could be heard even from afar. What a disgusting couple. Dihao expressed his revulsion from behind a sandy hill. Both the man and the woman were powerful beings. Fu Xiaotian was already at the level of a great deity. As for the woman, she was gifted with a talent in magic and spells. After inheriting the secret powers of Fu Xiaoroshan's deceased wife, she was almost the level of a great deity as well. Both of them were the strongest people in the entire continent. Otherwise, they would not simply propose to risk their lives in the desert. In their opinion, if the desert had a way in, there must be a way out. Before going in, the two of them had done their research. They believed that the desert must be inhabited by one or more beasts, known to the people as the demon of droughts. The former explorers were probably unfamiliar with the geography of the desert or were unable to defeat the demon, so none of the explorers returned. Fu Xiaotian grew up in a desert, so he knew about its natural features. In his early years, he once fought and got rid of a drought demon, so he knew how to fight one. Confidently, he thought that a visit to the mysterious desert would not be a big deal. In fact, they even had time to make love rather than explore the place. After a while, the couple finally stopped their intercourse activity and got up from the sand, though panting for more. "This place is so hot. I am drenched in sweat," Lu Yingying complained. She was quite reluctant to stand on her feet. "Master, we only need to stay for one day to accomplish our mission. I do not think any exploration is necessary." Fu Xiaotian pulled her up. "Now that we are here, we should really take a look around. If we can find the problematic drought demon, it will be a great achievement as a couple. Our marriage will be recognized by many more on the continent. As you know, as soon as our relationship becomes public, many will start to talk behind our backs. Some would even think that we are the reason behind Meng Ke's death. But I am scared. After all, no one has been able to survive this place," Lu Yingying protested. "Don't worry. I am here. You do not have to be afraid of all those demons. I am here to protect you." Fu Tianxiu's sweet words were able to cheer her up. Fu Tianxiao was a sweet talker. Anything he said to a girl always sounded thoughtful. Also, he had prepared many things in advance. A bottle of honey water, some food, and even an umbrella. The umbrella was green in color, so when they walked under the green shade, it formed a picturesque scene with distinct color contrasts. Nevertheless, it only took 2 days to shatter their romance. They had yet to find the legendary demon, nor the entrance where they came through. Fu Xiaotian and Lu Yingying had done everything they could to break their way out, but the exit was still nowhere to be seen. The sun remained scorching hot, and 2 days of exposure and dehydration had shed their skin off. Fu Xiaotian was no longer the thoughtful man he used to be. In fact, he started to take strict control over their food and water. Lu Yingying was no longer granted access to the supply. From his observation, Dihao finally realized that the desert had the unique ability to revert the celestial beings back to their very mundane ways. Even a celestial being who fed on the wind and drank the dew had to live on like a regular human being who depended on food and water. Otherwise, even a celestial being would die from hunger and thirst. Outside of the desert, the couple no longer needed food, so the amount of food that Fu Xiaotian had with him was very scarce. He only brought them as a romantic gesture. Consequently, when hunger and thirst struck them, they finally realized they needed it. 2 days were enough to change their appearance. Lu Yingying was no longer happy, and her pretty face was totally sunburned. Even her supple lips were chapped. Chapter 2967. The Couple's Challenge 3. Fu Xiaotian was no longer the romantic gentleman that he was before entering the desert. He reprimanded Lu Yingying for drinking too much water during their stay here, and even began to stop supplying her with any. The cruel reality for survival shredded the veil of love that the two had for one another, revealing their true nature deep down. On the 3rd day, the two lovebirds began to calculate and ration how much water they could drink to the point where they fought with each other. Dihao was hiding in the dark, watching them arguing from day to night. and then he asked the pink candle dragon next to him, "Is it true that everyone who comes here will argue?" The pink candle dragon nodded. Most of them. Some started to fight early on, and some took time to break down. This desert is a bit strange. How quickly it took for them to feel hungry and thirsty was not based on their skills or abilities, but the degree of loyalty they had for each other. The earlier they fought, the faster they got hungry. The later they fought, the later they got hungry. I had seen a very persistent couple that survived for a month. During that time, the man even cut the flesh on his arm for his lover to eat. But in the end the woman killed him, just to drink his blood. Dihao remained silent. Perhaps, fate wanted to teach him a lesson about love, and give him a phobia toward relationships. What happened next, he asked. Then the woman lived on the flesh and blood of the man for 2 more days. But after that, she died from the heat. Before she died, she really regretted what she had done. She frequently shed tears and called the man's name. The flesh and blood of her lover supported her for only 2 days. Dihao did not believe it. When she killed the man's flesh and blood immediately became rotten. She couldn't consume it anymore. Dihao felt rather uncomfortable by the sharing he heard. In the beginning, he thought that the woman who made this desert had been getting more hot-tempered, which resulted in the temperature rising. Now he was wondered if she was the demonic side of his mother. Perhaps, the person behind this desert used the resentment between the couples as a form of nutrients to grow this place. Also, it seemed that the only way to break out of here was to get rid of that demon. However, this demon had surely grown stronger after feeding on the couples for more than 10,000 years. It was probably even more powerful than the omen. If he were in his prime, he might have a chance of defeating her and turn the sky into ashes, but now, his small body no match to her. Although this was a demon from his mother's past life, she should not know him and would not show him any mercy. So what can he do? He was so worried. When he was thinking of a way to get out, the pink candle dragon beside him suddenly hooked his sleeves with its claws. "She is here. She is here." Dihao was surprised that she had returned. It seemed that the woman in white appeared out of thin air. He quickly asked the pink candle dragon, "Are we going to dive into the ground this time?" The pink candle dragon shook its head. "No, you can watch the show this time." Dihao sat to watch what would happen next. The couple that was fighting suddenly stopped when the darkness suddenly surrounded them. Then, they saw the woman in white. Lu Yingying called out, "The drought demon! The demon has emerged." Dihao was speechless. Such an idiot. Although this woman was not a fairy, she was not a demon either, okay? If she were, they would already be dead. Fu Xiaotian also breathed a sigh of relief. We finally scammed her out. Dihao frowned when he heard that. Was this couple just pretending to fight? If they did, this would be interesting. The woman stared at Fu Xiaotian. Do you really love her? Can you sacrifice anything for her? Chapter 2968. The Couple's Challenge 4. Fu Xiaotian paused for a moment upon hearing the question. He looked at the woman and cleared his throat upon replying, "Yes." His voice was hoarse because of his thirst, so it did not sound very confident. Lu Yingying was the most beautiful person in the world to him, but when she was compared to the strange woman in front of them, she was pale in comparison. Although this woman looked cold, she had a unique temperament. This temperament could drive men crazy when they saw her. The pale woman smiled and then sighed. "I think that you are a talented person, so I wanted to let you go. However, I didn't expect you to have someone in your heart. This has made my decision rather difficult." Lu Yingying added, "Why are you being indecisive?" "Demon, don't try to confuse my master." She rushed toward the woman and attacked. Her martial arts was top-notch, but her strength was clearly weakened because of her hunger. Nevertheless, it was compelling when she attacked. Many white lights fired at the woman from all directions at the same time. The woman in white only waved her sleeves, and the white light from the sky turned into cloth. Fu Xiaoroshan's facial expression changed. He originally wanted to attack her as well, but he put that idea in the back burner. This pale woman's power was not only strange but certainly very high. He and Lu Yingying were no match for it. "Who are you?" What can we do for you to let us go? The woman's eyelashes trembled slightly as she sighed. I don't want you to have a lover. Fu Xiaotian looked down on the ground as he replied. This is hard. He secretly gestured to Lu Yingying. After all, they had been partners for a long time, and they had a tacit understanding of each other. As soon as she saw the signal, she quietly moved closer to him. All she was doing now was waiting for Fu Xiaotian to make another gesture. Then both of them could join forces and attack the woman. The two of them had prepared for this day by cultivating a technique of combining their power. Once they applied it, they could double their skill and become almost invincible. Lu Yingying believed that as long as they used this technique, they could kill this woman. Meanwhile, the woman in white did not seem to be aware of the impending danger. She looked up at the sky and sighed. It's so cold. I can't see the sun. Lu Yingying chuckled upon hearing it. What was wrong with this white woman? It seemed like she had never seen the sun before. At that moment, Fu Xiaotian took the opportunity and launched an attack. Pooh! A swift sound was heard as the sword in Fu Xiaoshan's palm was inserted into Lu Yingying's chest. Lu Yingying could not believe it, and her eyes widened in disbelief. Master you! Fu Xiaotian looked down at the ground, feeling guilty for what he had done. Yingying, you said that you would walk through fire for me, and you would give me anything. This is the time to pay for it with your life. The two were master and apprentice, so they naturally knew each other's weaknesses. Fu Xiaotian had stabbed her at the weakest point of her body, so Lu Yingying slowly fell to the ground. You. The one you love most is yourself. She fell onto the yellow sand, widened her eyes, and breathed her last breath. Then Fu Xiaotian withdrew the sword from her chest and looked up at the woman in white. He gently said, Now my sweetheart is gone. We can take things forward. I like you, even if you are a demon. I like you. The pale woman did not look at him but still kept her focus on the sky above. It's so cold. I'm so cold. Fu Xiaotian looked around in confusion and tried to step forward. He opened his arms widely as if wanting to hug the woman. If you are cold, my arms are here for you. However, the woman did not respond. Fu Xiaotian was a bold man, so he stepped forward again. He was tempted to place his arms on her waist. Di Hao frowned, but the pink candle sighed at the scene. There will be another frozen man. The last time when someone wanted to hold her to give her warmth, the result was that he was turned into an ice sculpture. When the sun was up, he melted into water. When Fu Xiaoshan's arms were going to reach for the woman's waist, there was the sound of strong winds in the area, and suddenly, there was a green thorn barrier in front of the woman. Fu Xiaoshan did not manage to touch the beauty, but the sharp thorn poked into his arm. Chapter 2969. Inner demons. Fu Xiaotian snorted and retreated as if an electric current hit him. Cold sweat started to roll down from his forehead, and he was clearly in pain. Who are you? His tone changed. It's me. A man floated in the air. The man had a beautiful appearance and was wearing a bamboo green robe. He had a foldable fan with a starry sky picture painted on it. Beside him was a strong and slender candle dragon, which made him look even more elegant and handsome. Despite the dark sky that was covered by clouds, the man seemed to be radiating with an aura around him. Fu Xiaotian was also a handsome man. However, when compared to the man in front of him, he was probably just a plain rock. Fu Xiaoshan's eyes were now fixed on the candle dragon. Although he did not know the man in the green robe, he heard about candle dragons, which were extremely rare. Those who could make a candle dragon their pet were surely extraordinary beings. With that in mind, he took a step further back and took a deep breath. Who are you? The man did not look at him as his eyes were locked on the woman in white. His eyes sparkled as he clenched his fists. Shijiao. He obviously did not expect to meet her here, so his voice was full of surprise. The woman looked at him and repeated his words like a robot. Shijiao. It seemed that this was the first time that she had heard the name. The man stared at her closely and seemed to have thought of something. His facial expression changed gradually. You are not her. Her expression and temperament were very different, and even her aura was different. The current Gu Shijia was a cunning and experienced woman. Her expression always revealed her wisdom, but she usually had a lazy temperament. Meanwhile, the woman in white looked innocent and pure. Nevertheless, there seemed to be something wrong with her. He suddenly stepped forward and blurted out, "Master." This woman seemed to be the one in his nightmares. The two seemed so similar. The green-robed man's heart was racing, and his fists were clenched so tightly in his sleeves to the point where they were turning white. In his nightmare, his master was clearly dead. How could she suddenly appear here? Furthermore, her body still carried such a strong magical aura. What was going on here? The woman frowned at the man, and her indifferent gaze patrolled his face. It seemed that she was in deep thought. Master. This man was naturally Fan Qianshi. He looked at the woman in front of him, and his heart seemed to have a grievance but also unclear closeness. He made up his mind and stepped forward. "Master, don't you recognize me? I am Fan Qianshi, your apprentice." The woman blinked her eyes in quick succession. She had really big, black eyes, and her skin was extremely fair. Upon gazing into each other's eyes, it was as if there was no end. "My apprentice," she reached out to him with her little hand. "Do you have wine?" Needless to say, Fan Qianshi was stunned by the question. He looked at her intricately as if trying to study her. The woman in front of him seemed to have lost her memory and could not remember anything, but her habits never changed. He put his hand into his storage space and took out a wine gourd and handed it over to her. The woman's sleeves were rolled up, and she accepted the wine. She took off the lid from the bottle and immediately drank the wine. However, after she took a sip, she frowned and spat it on the floor. When she looked up again, her eyes were murderous. "Bastard! How dare you lie to me?" She flicked her fingertip, and the wine gourd instantly shattered into ashes. At the same time, the alcohol was scattered all over the ground, leaving a pungent smell in the area. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.